Hello everyone and welcome to the debut edition of the Match of the Month podcast here on the Grappl Audio Network, your monthly deep dive into all the best wrestling matches from around the world. I can think of no better man to join me for this inaugural episode than my co-host on the British Wrestling Experience, the man who keeps JP and Joe in line over on Spotlight. He's the self-proclaimed Mick Hucknall of BritRes. It's my good friend Benno.
The Mick Hucknall of BritRes, my God. You
said it.
Yeah, I know. And my hair is it's getting worse, Jamesie. Week by week, it is getting really, really bad. I need to get the clippers like you have at some point. But no, it's great to be on here, and great to have you over here on Grappl as well. We've not quite poached you from Post, like I said on our last podcast. Call it a loan. Call it we're sharing you, Jamesie. You're just over here to talk some of the non-BritRes matters, and I'm made up to have this show over here on Grappl, and I can't think of a better man than yourself to be presenting it.
Oh, thanks a million, Benno. I'm looking at it as my international call-up. I feel I've been playing well in the British scene for the last 12 months with yourself and Martin on the British Wrestling Experience, and it's time to get called up to get on the international stage, you know.
Oh no, we the WWE, is that what that is? Is that
no. Well, speaking of Triple H, I did have a good chance this afternoon to listen to your last episode of the Spotlight, and that was a serious burial you guys gave to poor old Triple H.
That was purely coming as well from on BWE, me by mistake playing Triple H's theme on my phone, and then I tried to explain it on our Spotlight podcast, and then literally 40 minutes later, we've all got our ills out about Triple H and just got it out. It felt good. It felt like the Vince McMahon rant we did a couple of weeks ago as well, just to like Joe said, those pent up feelings we all have about Triple H from the early 2000s, where he was probably the most hated man in wrestling in our kind of circles, and he became like the internet favorite with NXT, but we definitely got our digs in.
You know what's coming, Benno, with Triple H, and it's something that a few friends of mine have been speculating on for a while. At what point does he decide to put the NXT title on himself? Because that's the last thing that he's left to do, to look at those viewing figures on NXT TV and to have the arrogance to think that if maybe he was champion, he could bring the whole brand back up, because I can totally see that happening. And can you imagine the 40-minute epic against Johnny Gargano or one of these guys, or Adam Cole, and him trying his best to keep up with these younger guys who are half the size of him, and oh my God.
Oh, you know we'd love it. Oh, honestly, it's funny because on BWE we were talking, weren't we, over on Post about me playing the TEW demo, which is like the spiritual successor to EWR, and I believe that's like a bug in the game. A lot of people make real life databases, and when the computer runs a simulation of NXT, every single time it seems to give Triple H the belt, because he's the most over on the NXT roster, if you count him as technically on the NXT roster. It makes sense. I can imagine Triple H's brain kind of working the same way. Yeah, it's only a matter of time, I reckon. I think he's had his moments in the sun as like the internet good guy, I could see, with his alleged emotion and his alleged backstage war with Paul Heyman. Maybe the real internet Triple H will come out soon.
Totally, yeah. It'll be art imitating life, I'm sure. Can you imagine the two quads exploding in the middle of the ring when he gets about 30 minutes into a Johnny Gargano epic and he just can't keep up anymore? That'll be just, oh my God, the worst thing ever. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Triple H, and I don't think he'll be a man that'll come up on any of our lists in the next few months, though. You'll never know, I suppose. And I do think I'm delighted you're the first guest on the show, Benno. Like it was you came to me in the first place with the idea for the show. Can you just maybe explain to the listeners what was your thinking behind the concept of the show?
I think the thinking was that we're all a bunch of amateur, unprofessional jokers over on the Grappl Spotlight podcast, and you know what we need? We need to bring Dad in. We need to bring in like a grown up in the room. Like obviously JP's got kids as well, but you know we get a bit mischievous over on the Spotlight podcast, and Grappl Gareth we should probably bring us into line a bit, because while we do talk star ratings, and we do I think we do have a good mix of like the three of us having a laugh, and then also trying to do serious wrestling analysis like the Triple H thing we mentioned before. And again, while we do mention star ratings, I did feel like maybe we were missing something on our feed that was a bit more, hard-nosed star rating based. And I know you, James. I know you're the man with the spreadsheet. And we've managed to migrate you over to the Grappl app slowly but surely as well. And I just thought, you'd be perfect for it. And I just thought there was maybe a bit of a space for that for maybe talking in a bit more detail what the best matches of each given month are. Although maybe it was the wrong time to pitch it in the middle of a pandemic. But timing isn't everything, Jamesie.
Yeah, that's probably the first thing we should explain, because we have been talking about this for a while, and at the time we were just going to start doing the previous month's matches and that kind of thing, but along came coronavirus and basically put a halt to all the good wrestling that's been going on in the world, rather than all the wrestling in the world, because there is still wrestling going on, even though it's not the greatest stuff in the world, let's be honest. So what we've decided to do is go back to January, and myself and you and yourself are going to cover January this month. I think we have lined up JP to do February with us. And then I'm thinking about maybe combining it, maybe March, April, possibly May, with another guest maybe down the line as well, just to cover everything, because there are matches happening here and there that are noteworthy, But just to go back to the star ratings thing for a minute, Benno, have you, previous to Grappl, were you a spreadsheet guy, or were you a guy who kind of kept? I remember hearing Joe talk about his spreadsheets, and he has spreadsheets going back to the mid 2000s and always kept records of his best matches. Was that something that you were doing all the time?
It's funny because, for me, I was a spreadsheet guy, but I wasn't so much a wrestling star ratings guy until that fateful trip to, I think it was a Progress Sheffield show, and Gareth pitched me on the idea of the app, and I was just like, oh god, that's an incredible idea. And then obviously when the app came out and we were still over on Indie Corner, we tried to incorporate star ratings a bit more into what we do. I wouldn't say I wasn't making star ratings, if I was writing reviews, for example, that might slip in. But as far as keeping a log of it before Grappl, I probably wasn't the best for it, which is madness, because I am Mr. Spreadsheet. In work, I've said this to you off air, Jamesie, and hopefully nobody from my work is listening at this point. But tell you what, if I ever get sacked from my current cushy office job, I'm gonna have to go in one day with a USB drive and get all my spreadsheets off the work computer, because I've got one for my bills, I've got one for shopping, I've got one for just kind of a calendar, planning my life. I've got one. My big one is I've got one for film. And the films one is interesting because I've kept that up to date for I've had the same job for 10 years. So, and it's one of those very boring quality assurance spreadsheet kind of based jobs anyway. So there is a lot of downtime. And I've always kept on that spreadsheet basically every film I've ever seen. And unfortunately, I made the mistake at the start. I think it was to do with I did have an app I was using on my phone as well, especially IMDb for one, and another, I think it's called Movie Mate, another app. And those ratings were out of 10. So I started out at 10, and then I've kind of had to stick with that formula. So it's a bit annoying if I'm talking to somebody or trying to, put my rating into a more of a letterboxed kind of a format, or a 5-star format. I've kind of got to do the maths and halve my ratings. But yeah, with films as well, I think I'm similar to my wrestling ratings. I can be generous. I think I'm very generous with films. I'll give a lot of 7, 8s, and 9s. But I think with films, maybe because it was my rating system was out of 10, I always struggled to give something 10. 10 just felt really strong, just felt too much, you know? And I very rarely gave... It was like when... I don't know if you were the same growing up playing a lot of computer games where the latest game had come out on PlayStation 1 or the Mega Drive or, on the Super Nintendo, and all the games magazines would be going at 100 out of 100, 10 out of 10.
Yes.
And I used to always think well, what's above that? What happens if... in 5 years we're making better games than this? What do you do? So I was
always... what happened, Meltzer.
There you go. Yeah, Meltzer's the best example of that. Another reason why, that's one man's opinion. Whereas with Grappl, you get plenty. There'll be loads of Grappl plugs throughout this, especially with me on.
Absolutely.
Gareth will enjoy that. But yeah, because of that, I think I maybe always had that mentality. So I've kind of carried that over to wrestling. I'll be generous. I'll be happy to give a 4, a 4.25, a 4.5. A 4.75 will be kind of... a lot of the time as high as I go. It is very, very rare I'll give 5 stars out. I think maybe I'm partially just a coward. Maybe there are matches I give 4.75 that I maybe just need to just admit to myself that really it's a 5. Because if you use my out of 10 ratings like I do for films, what's that? 9.5 out of 10. Just give the 10 better at that point. Round up. I don't know what it is. I don't like giving that solid, that certification too much of 5s. But yeah, I'd say I'm generous, but generous to a point. Like I say, when I get to those upper upper echelons, maybe I get a little bit nervous from a part. I'm definitely not a Meltzer, and definitely not someone who's going to be looking to giving 5.5s out or 6s out, or pushing Grappl to add them to our scale.
Yeah, because I'm the exact same as you. I do all my spreadsheets on the work PC as well. It says a lot about our respective employers that we're spending all our time in work doing up wrestling spreadsheets and movie spreadsheets, doesn't it?
Oh god, that's what it's like working in the public sector, mate.
There you go, exactly. Getting paid for doing wrestling spreadsheets. How bad? But like, I started seriously keeping a spreadsheet. I made various attempts over the years to do one because I always liked the idea of it, and I'd always have it ready on the 4th of January for Wrestle Kingdom, the first big show of the year, and I do that, and then I'd fall away. But then 2017, I made a really big. 2015, 16, I was keeping a Word document where I just kind of, if I thought a match was really good, say 4.5 or over, I'd put it on the Word document. But it was very hard to kind of look at that then and kind of come to conclusions about it. Okay, how many of a certain guy have I got on this sheet or something, So 2017, I was determined I'd keep a proper spreadsheet. And once you do it for about a month, and you force yourself to do it, and you do it with discipline. And what I would do is, if I'm watching matches at home, I just have the notes app open on my phone, and I jot down my star rating for that show, and then maybe every two or 3 days, put them all up on the spreadsheet and work, And once you discipline yourself like that and start doing it, it just becomes nature, and it becomes really enjoyable. And like I was talking to people earlier today, like I haven't necessarily missed having lots of current wrestling to watch in the last 2 months since everything closed down. I've been really enjoying watching the retro stuff and looking back at old Raws and Nitros and that kind of thing. But what I've really missed is actually the nerdy process of putting stuff into the spreadsheet and watching the whole thing unfold. I get this really strange fulfillment from entering the data, and like I would have kind of page 1 of my spreadsheet would be the matches, and then page 2 would be my wrestler of the year list. So I have this really nerdy system where I assign point scores to certain star ratings, and I give each person points based on the star ratings they got in all their matches. So I have this kind of ongoing top 100, top 150 in the world of wrestlers, and just watching that unfold as the year goes on just fascinates me, you know what I mean? And just that whole nerdy process of entering data. And I don't know what that says about me, that's the thing I enjoy about it more than anything, And then, of course, Grappl came along then, and that's such a handy thing. Like, that has become now my little notes app at home. So I'm now at home knocking my little ratings into Grappl and that kind of thing and bringing that into work. So it's become a really handy kind of in-between for me. I don't think I'll ever give the spreadsheet up. And I suppose the one small issue with Grappl is as much as poor Garrett does his best, you'll never get everything on there. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much wrestling going on everywhere in the world, and we'll nag Garrett. There'll always be a tiny promotion somewhere that'll run a match that might get on your sheet and that kind of thing. So I will always probably have the spreadsheet going on the side,
Oh, he put classic ECW on the other day, and all the comments on Twitter were like, "So when are you going to get TNA up? When are you going to?" There's always somebody's not happy no matter what he does.
Poor fella.
I know. Yeah. But I think he's been using this downtime though to add a lot of that retro stuff, and it's been good for me as well to kind of use the downtime to I knew we were talking January today, so over the last couple of days was able to go back and fill in some gaps using Grappl, looking at what was the highest rated stuff. We're going to mention the top 10 later, aren't we? Talk that stuff. Even, as well, give them a shout out. I use Cage Match, had a little look at their highest rated stuff. And, we make fun of Meltzer, and we'll always say, especially with Grappl on the scene, well, why take what, as Gareth will always say, why take one man's opinion when you could take an entire world's opinion as you can on Grappl? But I always, Meltzer's opinion, even though he might have broken his own scale, I think is also useful as well. So, yeah, using that during this downtime to give me a bit of a guide's been helpful as well.
Absolutely. And I suppose before we go into our top, we're going to each do a top 5 of the month and count them down kind of from 5 to 1. Is there anything that, there's so much wrestling out there now that I don't think one person can watch, like even Meltzer doesn't get to watch half of this stuff, and it's his full-time job. You know what I mean? Is there stuff that you don't watch? Are there blind spots in your viewing, say, that's kind of reflected in your list?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think for me, doing BWE, obviously, we have to keep abreast, don't we, of European wrestling, and that's a full-time job itself. A lot at the best of times, and not always the most fun job, is it, Jamesie? There's definitely shows where we're like, oh god, what are we reviewing this month? Which wouldn't have been the case 2 years ago, but that's its own subject. And then for the Spotlight podcast, we kind of have a really casual approach to it, which I kind of like it, in that we kind of just turn up and it's whatever the three of us have watched that week. We try not to. I think the easiest way to burn out on a podcast like that every week is to kind of say, right, this week we have to review, say, the MLW pay-per-view from last weekend, and Joe would probably shoot himself rather than do that, you know? You'd be made up, yeah. He'd do a whole section on MLW. We got his review in last week, though, so, you know, he got his 30 seconds, so, you know, that's enough. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like, the way wrestling is right now, even if you really enjoy something, I really enjoy MLW. I really enjoy, to be honest, when I watch it, and you'll hear about it a bit later today, I really enjoy Impact as well, you know, as much as that gets a slag of it. Ring of Honor, I believe, got better, or, you know, did before the pandemic. When am I going to find time to watch that? So I think, you know, my regular viewing is, you know, a lot of the European stuff, New Japan, AEW. I try not. I don't want to be one of those guys who watches WWE every week anymore. So, you know, big WWE pay-per-views, I'm probably the one of the three of us on Spotlight more likely to have watched that. And then other than that, it's kind of recommendations, you know, things from Grappl that maybe do particularly well when Gareth puts out the top 10s, or just generally, you know, things I see people talking about on the timeline. So if it comes to, like, let's say a Noah or an All Japan, which, you know, this being January, it's a Japan heavy month, isn't it? This month, match of the month for January now. It's a Wrestle Kingdom heavy month as well. But, you know, for an All Japan or a Noah, there's a lot of talk on the timeline about, you know, Kaito Kiyomiya or, you know, Go Shiozaki, or, you know, the Kento Miyahara. If, you know, when you hear, you know, Kento Miyahara Jake Lee match getting all the talk, you have to watch it at some point. It might take a while, kind of in the content era, but, you know, the big matches like that, you know, I'll hunt down and watch. But I would say for me, I think maybe you're more than me, somebody who, you know, maybe gets into the weeds a little bit more with the Japan stuff, especially, you know, with your trusty spreadsheet going. I think is that fair to say?
Yeah, like I would be at this point. I'm a big cherry picker. Like I'm trying to think. There aren't very many promotions that I watch religiously. Like I don't even watch AEW every week. I certainly don't watch WWE or NXT UK every week. You know, it's more that when I hear of big matches, and I suppose I'd also be somebody who might. There's particular wrestlers that I will want to. You know, if I hear of a Walter match, even if it's NXT UK, I'm probably going to watch it. If I hear of a Daniel Bryan match, you know, Daniel Bryan matches are so rare these days that they almost feel like a treat when they come along. I'm going to seek out that episode of SmackDown and watch that Daniel Bryan match. You know, Tim Thatcher when he was on the Indies, you know, people like David Starr. I would follow his matches in great detail because, you know, the people I like, I will follow in detail. And then everyone else I try and cherry pick. Obviously, New Japan. I don't claim that I'm not a guy who's going to watch all the Road 2 shows in New Japan or all the Cork and Hall shows. But the big events I will watch. And again, if I hear someone like Alan Forel praising a match from New Japan, I'm definitely, you know, a lesser known match, I'm going to seek that out. And yeah, I do try and keep up in Japan. But again, it's very much cherry picking. Like I don't watch full shows from Japan. I don't have time for undercard 6-man tags and that kind of thing. Particular promotions, I would say Dragon Gate is a promotion I don't especially follow unless it's a really heralded match. I think Dragon Gate is one of those promotions that the people who love it talk about how you need to be following it in detail. You need to follow the storylines. You need to follow the factions and what's going on with the factions. It's not really a promotion that lends itself to cherry picking. So from that point of view, I tend to kind of leave it alone unless there's unless I see something in the Grappl top 10 or something like that. You know, Lucha, again, I just, number one, it's a time thing. It's an appreciation and an understanding thing. A lot of Lucha just still kind of tends to pass me by. Now, again, I will seek out certain people, like there's some of the mat wrestlers from Lucha, the really good technical guys like a Hechicero or a Virus. I'll seek their matches out if I see them. I like some of the Lucha brawls, but like I'm not a guy who's watching AAA or CMLL on a regular basis. And the same goes for Joshi wrestling as well. Again, unless it's a really heralded match that's, you know, that's getting over 4.5 from a lot of people, I'm tending to leave it alone. And then a scene that I kind of want to watch a little bit more of is the Australian scene. It feels like it's a scene that's where Europe was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. You know, it feels like it's bubbling under. There's lots of good talent. You have Will Ospreay going. We'll probably talk later about Will Ospreay going over there and having noteworthy matches with people and that kind of thing. So it's a scene that I really want to kind of watch a little bit more of because I feel it is on the rise. You know.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think I think this last couple of months has been people kind of going, "Oh God, that Australian scene." You know what I mean? Looking at looking at say Will Ospreay going out there and kind of killing it out there with a Dowie James. Spoiler, that's a match I might talk about a bit later. But again, it's cherry picking. But it's like I wish there was the time in the day to sit there and if we weren't following the European indies so closely, and I wasn't trying to follow the big American stuff so closely, I would love to just sit and be a full-time MCW fan, because it looks like the best of probably what Brit Res should be looking like right now, but unfortunately doesn't. And there's loads of stuff like that, where it's like time is a premium, isn't it? Like it's Ring of Honor, for example. Like I said before, they're starting to do great stuff. Marty Scale seems to be have a bit of a handle on it, but I wonder no matter how good it is, between watching everything else I watch, between trying to watch New Japan full-time, AEW full-time, and keep an eye on everything else, when is the time to kind of watch something like that? But I would probably echo what you said about Mexico as well. Mexico is one that is, unfortunately a real blind spot for me. Maybe 1 month, James, maybe when there's like a big month where, you could maybe grab somebody who's a bit of a Mexico expert. Because, I would kind of say in our bubble as well, you don't hear a lot of talk about Mexico. Seems a little bit undercovered, doesn't it? So maybe something could be done there with getting somebody over here.
Yeah, the guys who I listen to when it comes to Mexico are our friend Ben Owens and both Johnny. They're the guys, like when they start talking about a match, I'll kind of give it attention. They really know their stuff, you know what I mean? And they're knowledgeable guys who kind of be able to separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, But anyway, Benno, we've been talking for long enough about it. Let's get straight into it. We're going to run down both of the structure of the show in general will be we'll have a guest on, we'll both make a top 5 for the month, and we'll run those down kind of in taking turns to discuss each match as they go. So as the guest, Benno, I'm going to give you the honour. What's your number 5 match of January 2020?
Right, well, my number 5, and this was probably the toughest to kind of choose. I think my other 4 slotted in quite easily. Definitely my top 3. My number 5, it was kind of a bit of a glut of 4 to 4.25 star matches that I kind of had on my spreadsheet, and I just went with the one that I found the most fun. I'll mention the others later when we get into honourable mentions, but every time I kind of looked at my list and tried to make the decision, my eye just kept getting drawn back to it. And again, it probably shouldn't want to have been one of the big matches from the weekend, but from New Japan's biggest weekend of the year at New Year's Dash, Tomohiro Ishii and Hiroki Goto against Shingo and Evil. A tag match that should have just been a tag match on New Year's Dash, and should have just been kind of like another one of those fun New Year's Dash matches that we all kind of go, oh yeah, that was a fun show, but let's talk about where the stories are going next. And it felt like to a man, everyone was talking about this match, and honestly, I thought it was as good as pretty much anything on any of the undercards of Wrestle Kingdom that weekend. That's why it's here, and maybe some of the other undercard stuff from Wrestle Kingdom isn't. It was just so much fun. I gave it 4.25 on the Grappl app. I think the average for that 4.17. So I'm a little bit above the average on it. I'm below Meltzer with his 4.5 rating for it. But for me, it was just so much fun. And there are matches we're going to talk about in this top 5 where I think, we can get into the depth, and especially you, James, we can get into the weeds of, the stories of the matches. I wouldn't say this was a story match. This was just a match of, to quote JP, 4 big beefy fuckers getting in the ring and beating 10 shades of shit out of each other. It was just, it felt like the 4 of them had something to prove as well. They weren't all not featured over Wrestle Kingdom weekend, but between the 4 of them, I think it's fair to say they all should be maybe higher in New Japan's kind of, I don't know, their use of them at the moment. I feel like the 4 men, especially if you look at Ishii, and maybe Shingo's time is coming down the line, but people who I do feel could have been utilized a little bit better by New Japan in the months surrounding this, and it really felt like they thought that too, because they went out there, they took their time to shine. And again, they just beat the absolute crap out of each other. And it wasn't a match where there wasn't selling, because Tomohiro Ishii's in there, so of course the selling's going to be great. I thought every combination of all 4 of them was great as well. Just lots of big lariats, lots of big bombs, and just one of those matches that it brought Corrigan to the feet. And it was just one of those matches that just brought kind of get everybody together in a show that can be a bit of a malaise, especially after 2 days of Wrestle Kingdom. Again, I think it elevated the show that it was on to that degree, and it was just so much fucking fun, Jamesy. That's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing that makes this stand for me above the other matches that I've maybe give 4.25 for in my honourable mentions. I just had such a great time watching it that I just couldn't avoid it.
Yeah, how I would describe this match, Benno, is it's pure comfort food wrestling. You know those evenings where you just want comfort food. You just want a big plate of pasta, or you want to get your favorite takeaway or something like that, and just sit down and eat it. And to hell with the consequences. It's just, and as you said, that there's no fine detail here. It is exactly you look at the names in this match, and what you get is exactly, what you see on paper is exactly what you get in execution, And as you said, you get your little bit of selling from Ishii. It sets up matches in the future very well. It serves its purpose that well in terms of, by the end of this match, after that big strike exchange between Goto and Shingo, you really want to see that singles match and that never openweight title match. You really want to see Ishii against Evil. So it's as you said, a mid-card match on New Year's Dash, which is a show where, they are often taking it a little bit easy and it's more of a storyline thing. It serves every possible purpose. And as you said, three guys with, 3 of the 4 probably had chips on their shoulder in terms of how they were used for Wrestle Kingdom. And it left me I rewatched it this morning, and it left me really sad that this coronavirus thing has cost us this Shingo Takagi run with the never openweight title. I can't wait till New Japan are back up and running in a healthy way and in a way that the wrestlers are healthy in front of good crowds. I can't wait to see what he does with that title, because that run he's going to have with that is going to be something else.
Yeah, I want him to have one of those long runs as well. We don't want one of those, swapping the belts that New Japan will often do with that particular belt as well. That's what I want to see as well. And yeah, that was the big thing coming out of this match. It was like, give me any combination of all these 4 and just take my money. Like, even Goto, who's someone I've been hot and cold on over the years, his exchanges with Shingo and Evil, like you said, made me excited for more of those combinations as well. If basically the rest of the year, when things get up and running again, if that never title is just different combos of these 4 and you mix a couple of the other big lads in as well, then New Japan's going to have a great mid-card this year when things are up and running as well. So yeah, it was that much fun. Like you say, maybe a really good microwave meal, like one of those premium ones, not like a crappy £1 one, a really, really good, well-heated one. Maybe one that you throw in the oven, Jamesy. It was just, like you say, it was what you would have expected going in. It wasn't, maybe it wasn't gourmet in far as like storytelling and stuff goes, but yeah, off the charts as far as what you would want out of these 4 in the ring together. So yeah, hopefully that explains a bit why I just couldn't avoid putting it as my number 5 for this.
No, absolutely a worthy choice. My number 5 is, and I think it's one you probably have higher, so we might leave it until you come up in your list. My number 5 was from Wrestle Kingdom Night 1, Kazuchika Okada against Kota Ibushi for the IWGP Heavyweight title. And I have things to say about this match, Benno, and I know you do as well, but I think we'll leave that until it comes up in your list, and we'll go straight into your number 4.
Okay, here's my number 4. And this might be one that a bit left field, this one, Jamesy. People might not be expected to end up in the top 5 of the month, and I'm hoping I get some backup from you on this one. I did say earlier I might visit Impact Wrestling, and maybe some of the star rating people out there might be shaking their heads at this one, but I gave it 4.5 stars, and I'm sticking with it. Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard. Now, don't turn off. Listen, come on. Let me explain myself first.
You're going to get us cancelled on night 1, Benno. What are you doing?
Oh, I know. That is not a sentence I should be saying. Like, I shouldn't be saying top 5 matches of the month in a Wrestle Kingdom month. I shouldn't be mentioning Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard, but I'm telling you, Jamesy, I went back and rewatched this thing, and it is just so good. I liked it more second time, and that doesn't always happen with these matches, and we'll get into that. This was a match that I loved on the night when it happened, and I loved even more. I think this match, if people haven't seen it, this is from the Hard to Kill show, Sami Callihan, Tessa Blanchard, from the 12th of January. This was right when that Tessa Blanchard story of the bullying, let's say allegations, but I mean allegations is probably giving it too much credit at this point, isn't it? But let's just say allegations for the sake of it. We're all over everything. There was a press day that day that she dropped out of, obviously, because the obvious questions were going to come up. And it was a match where it was built up and built up over their previous matches as one where, she was going to be the conquering babyface. She was going to turn up on this show and, supposedly be, the savior of Impact Wrestling. And then you find yourself in a situation where she very likely is going to get, you could probably think as a promotion, she's going to get booed out of the building. But honestly, I feel like the match is better for it. And I don't know whether that's the right thing to say or not. I feel like she's more intense as a result of it. And the crowd, at the start, there's a bit of rejection of her in small pockets, but you don't hear that by the end. And I think they do a really good job of telling a very, there's a lot of, we're going to talk a lot of Japan in this top 5, but as far as a kind of a Western style match and an intergender one at that, intergender isn't something I particularly enjoy normally. I just thought they did such a good job of it, from the start with Callahan trying to pile drive her immediately, and you've got Don Callis on the call kind of shouting that he's trying to punish her, and you could believe that watching live that he's going to be, with all this bad press around Tessa Blanchard, he's going to win in 5 seconds and this is going to be over. So I thought that was a really good move at the start of the match. But the biggest thing for me, it was the selling of Tessa Blanchard. I feel like it was the performance of her life in this one. Callahan was kind of going after her knees throughout the match, and she's just so good. I know you're a selling guy, Jamesie, and she was just so good in this match. Desperately clawing at him, biting the ropes, while Sami Callahan's being, as gross as he possibly can, and beating her down. And it's a relatively simple match in structure. It's the big bag heel beating down, the underdog babyface. But I just think the two of them are so good for the role in this one that just it really put it over the top for me. Is this a match you were high on, Jamesie, at the time, or me forcing you to rewatch it since? Were you a fan?
No, I was. At the time, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Like, I gave it 4.25, and it was on my list of honourable mentions anyway, so I would have brought it up no matter what. But like you, I rewatched this morning, and honestly, after watching this match, I was buzzing about how good it was. I know you had kind of been messaging me yesterday evening saying you had watched it and you had loved it. But like, I was just... the reason we watch wrestling is that feeling you get after watching a great match, where you're just left satisfied by the whole experience, and it's everything you would have possibly wanted from that match. And that's the feeling I got from this. And the first thing I did was I bumped it up to 4.5. It could easily have made, if I hadn't settled on my own top 5, I'd have no problem putting this on my list as well. Like, it really is that good. It's two of the best. Like, you talked about Tessa Blanchard's performance. I would say Sami Callahan's individual performance, one of the best of them. Of all these great matches that we've watched, as good as anybody, as an individual display. Like, he was the most disgusting, horrible heel in this match that you could ever possibly have. And as you said, there were probably people in that crowd going in there after the real life situation that had maybe in two minds about cheering for Tessa Blanchard, and that guy did everything in his power to turn that crowd against him and to get them behind her. Like, he's just vile. Like, the things he spits in her face, he's swearing at the crowd. There's one point he spits up in the air and tries to catch it in his own mouth, and the spit just lands on his own face, and he doesn't even bother wiping it off. And for about 10 minutes of the match, he's wrestling the match with this big streak of mucus or phlegm across his face, and he's just, you can't help but want this guy to lose the match. You know what I mean? It's just a really, really great performance. It's really good. And what I loved about it was he worked really stiff and really mean, and he hit hard. And like, there's a lot of intergender wrestling these days, and you try and look at the match objectively as two people wrestling, but you can't help but get a little bit uncomfortable about how stiff he's working here. You know what I mean? And it adds to the match rather than takes. It's not a kind of an unpleasant way. It's just in a, God, I really want her to fire back and stand up to him. That's what you're saying when you're watching the match. Stand up to this guy. And he brings this fire out of Tessa Blanchard that's just phenomenal. Like the babyface fire. It's like watching those matches from the 80s when Ricky Steamboat fires back against somebody and they're pumping the fist, and it's just a really great emotional match, I would say. You talked about the leg selling. She was amazing selling that leg. Like, there's one point, remember that point in the match where she flips over into that jackknife pin, and she to hold him, and he kicks out, and she kind of has landed on her legs to execute that pin hold, and after he kicks out, she's just on the ground clutching the legs, screaming in pain. You almost think, is she really injured? You know what I mean? It's just a stellar performance from her. You know what I mean? And as I said, two great performances, and like the last thing I ever thought is that we would ever have an Impact match on this podcast for the entire 2020, and here we are. And like I'm totally with you, Benno. Like I'm so glad you kind of made me rewatch this match, and we're so fulsome in your praise of it. Like, because I would encourage people who kind of think Impact and think, no way, I won't watch that. Watch this match. It really is that good.
Yeah, I kind of think like I've muddied the water of your debut episode here, James. You bringing this in because if you're someone who thinks I don't like Sami Callihan as a person, I don't like Tessa Blanchard as a person, you're not going to sell me on this match. I kind of get it. But I still think give it a chance because, yeah, it is. It's just, you mentioned, when you mentioned there, like Tessa Blanchard selling, like another point in the match was like a lot of her offense, she's basically selling her leg throughout the match. And a lot of her offense, it's a lot of code breakers, isn't it? She kind of spams that move in desperation. And sometimes in a match when wrestlers do that whole fighting through the pain thing, doesn't always work. But she's so convincing in a selling and she's so desperate that it does work here. That's how good she is. And yeah, I just thought the way they laid it out is so great, she does use a low blow in the match, but it's not an excuse. It's a counter to Sami trying to cheat and use, I think it was a belt or a chair at that point. And like you said, it's the structure of the match and just the raw emotion that gets pulled out of that structure that makes this so good. It's at the end when you just think she's got absolutely nothing left, like you mentioned with the victory roll, and she can barely even bridge to grab it, and like I say, Sami spits at her and she manages to do that gallant babyface last minute fight back, and it just I was the same. That's how I felt yesterday when I was excitedly DMing you about I can't leave this match off. It was that emotion. It brought emotion out of Josh Matthews, Jamesie. If that doesn't say everything, as a commentator, you could feel it in his voice and you can see it in her face. Again, the real life story. She is the villain. Don't get me wrong, but it's real emotion at the end of the match when when she's crying in the ring, and she does bring people along with her for a part in it too. And it is. It's just I think it's one of those things where it shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't be on this list, but something about all these disparate elements pulled together made it work. And that's not to say I'm not a fan of, the previous stuff they've done together. I was a big fan of that as well. But, those matches wouldn't have made my top 5. This, wouldn't have made, got near my top 10 for last year's top 10 podcast. Like, I think... But I think this is just something that's on that other level for all those reasons we mentioned, and again, we might not convince the ardent people who don't like Sami Callihan and don't like Tessa Blanchard or just don't want to give Impact the time. But I think it's absolutely worthy, and as far as having like that, like you said, that emotional feeling at the end of a match, this was high up there on my list of matches from January.
Absolutely, and I think the biggest praise we can possibly give the match is that they managed to make an Impact World Title match seem big and seem important and seem epic. And how many years is it since we've been able to say that? I'm talking years. Like, you could be going back to the glory days of Impact or TNA as it was known before that, before you can think of a match that really honestly felt big and epic and important. And that's to their credit that they were managing to do. The fact that we're talking about this match, despite ourselves and despite our views on them and our views on Impact, that's how good the match is. I'm prepared to put all that aside to still talk about it on the podcast, So we'll move on to my number 4, I think it is next. This is a match that I'd say has flown under an awful lot of radars. It's from the 10th of January. It's Daniel Makabe, probably a name you'll hear a lot from me over the next few months on this podcast, against Judas Icarus. And it's from 3-1 Battle. And it's the final of their G0 tournament, which was basically their version of the G1 Climax. And like part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast and part of the reason I kind of like having a platform like this is to be able to promote people like this and matches like this that definitely have flown under the radar, and to give people something to watch over the next few months as well. You know what I mean? When there's nothing else going on, to go back and watch this match from this small promotion in the Pacific Northwest. And the Pacific Northwest is this little bubble of the American independent scene it's bubbling under at the moment with some really good young talent. Like, you've got experienced guys like Makabe up there and Artemis Spencer, who people might remember from Super Strong Style 16 last year. And there's this new generation of young, hungry talents. And Judas Icarus is the younger guy. This match is basically the fiery underdog in Judas Icarus against the experienced company ace in Makabe. And Makabe has this special knack of taking lesser wrestlers or very inexperienced wrestlers and guiding them through these matches and giving them the best match of their life. Like Icarus, he's only 21. Serious potential. Like, he has a really unique look and wrestling style. He wrestles in his bare feet and a pair of dungarees. But like, I'm going to talk about another match of his in my honourable mentions. He's building up a really strong body of work up there in the Northwest. And as I said, if people are looking for a new scene to watch, or kind of to be in on the ground floor on a wrestling scene, they could do an awful lot worse than look into those guys in the Northwest. And I think it's the usual thing with a Makabe match, and anyone who knows me knows I'm very high on Daniel Makabe. And the greatness of his wrestling matches are the small details, the fine detail, you know. And the story of this match is, as I said, the fiery underdog coming up against the ace, and there's an increasingly severe injury to Makabe's knee, and that's like. I interviewed Makabe a while back for the British Wrestling Experience, and we were talking about this, and he was kind of saying to me, I'm not the greatest athlete in the world. You know, I can't do the high flying stuff. So I have to figure out a niche for myself in pro wrestling. And his niche is selling and fine detail. And some of the work in this match that he does selling this knee, like at one point there's a big spot where they do a tombstone on the floor, and Makabe lands on his knees to deliver the tombstone, and straight away he goes to the leg and sells it like death. And even at the finish, his finisher is the cattle mutilation. And when he puts the cattle mutilation on, he can only balance himself on one leg. He does the one-legged bridge, which straight away, when I see a one-legged bridge in a match, I'm throwing an extra half a star at it. You know, it's just one of those little nerdy pieces of selling, or I call it nerd bait, that always kind of reels me in, you know. And as I said, this is just a kind of a match out of the blue for a lot of people. Again, probably maybe one that people didn't expect to see on here, but I would encourage people to kind of give it a chance and give it a look. I liked how it was a full circle moment for Makabe. Like, the very first Makabe match I saw was the match he had against Timothy Thatcher back in 2017, which was his breakout moment. And it feels like this is full circle almost. Now he's in Thatcher's role, where he's the kind of experienced indie ace, and now he's giving Judas Icarus his moment and his big match. And maybe this is the match that will get Icarus kind of known more around the world and get him out there, you know. Did you get a chance to watch this, Benno? And what did you think of it?
Yeah, this is a match that, you know, if I wasn't doing this podcast, Jamesie, it might not have come under my radar. You know, maybe if I'd have caught a tweet from you raving about it or something, but I hadn't even seen that with this one. And this was one I went into completely blind, and I saw it, you know, so high up your list and beating out some of your honourable mentions, and I had to see it. And you know what? I absolutely loved it, honestly. Like, I'm so glad I watched this match, because, like, I'll be honest, Judas Icarus is not somebody on my radar whatsoever. You know, our man Dan, you know, I've seen a fair amount of his stuff over this last year, but, you know, nowhere near maybe the expert you are on him. But absolutely loved it. I like it. It had a good chance of cracking my top 5 after I'd seen it.
Wow.
That's how good this was. And again, it is not a typical...
That's what I want to hear.
There you go. It's not a typical me match either. It's not the type of match where I think maybe, you know, if I was given my own time, you know, it might have been something that I wouldn't have got round to. Maybe if I was at the end of the year trying to round up my match of the year, maybe I would have caught it there. But I'm so glad I caught it. And yeah, you know, I think the thing is, I think that Daniel Makabe, the thing I really like about him is, like, you know what he reminds me of? It's like, you know, when you used to watch like an IWA Mid-South, and like there'd be, you know, your big name indie guys would be all over the show, like, and then but then you'd have like an Eric Cannon, or you'd have like that, you know, that lone kind of like technical guy who kind of this is what he does, and this is how he wrestles, whether you love it or hate it, this is who this wrestler's going to be. And he kind of reminds me of someone who fits so well into that era that I do want to see, you know, everywhere. But yeah, I really, really loved it. And I think it was one of those matches where like towards the end, it devolves into a fight. Really, it kind of devolves.
Yeah.
It's a very, very structured match, with the limb work and the two of them taking their time. But the thing is about when it turns into a fight, what I really loved about it is, like Icarus is still targeting. He's still targeting the knee. It's like a targeted fight. They're brawling, but they're still both trying to win the match and trying to do it in a smart way. And yeah, that stuff. The moment where Daniel Makabe rolls to the outside to avoid the tope, kind of catches that dive and hits that tombstone and then sells the knee, which I knew already. I knew you were going to love that, so kind of just covered it as a spoiler. You particularly enjoy that moment where, like you say, where he doesn't want to win by count out and he pulls him into the ring.
Yeah.
All of it, like there's so many, like you said, it was very much a Jamesie match, a match of little moments, and you did get your big near falls that I bit on a couple of near the end, but yeah, absolutely loved it, for its small parts, but just for its big story as well, in a promotion that I don't see a huge amount of, and two wrestlers who maybe one I'm more familiar with than the other, but might not be on everybody's radar either. A real hidden gem, I would say, this one. And yeah, hopefully this is the type of match that you say this podcast can highlight for people.
I'm delighted, Benno. Do you know the way when you suggest a match that's a little bit off the wall and you think, God, this could go very badly, and Benno might come on here and say, I have no idea why you put this on the list. So I'm delighted to hear you enjoyed it. And as I said, like, if people are looking for wrestling to watch and there isn't much going on at the moment, go back. It's on YouTube. I can put the link up on Twitter. Like, once the podcast drops, I'll put the links to some of these matches up. Go and watch it. It's only maybe 22 minutes. Like, you don't get these prolonged epics with Daniel Makabe. There's a sweet spot to his wrestling that's kind of maybe 20-25 minutes, absolute max. It's not going to take up much of your time. And if you're in the business of getting in on the ground floor with newer wrestlers, I would say he's a good one, but especially Judas Icarus. And as I said, I will talk a little bit more. I won't talk too much about him because I do want to mention him in the honourable mentions as well. So we're back to your list now, Benno. You're number 3.
Yes. Okay. For me, again, this is where things got where I would expect them to kind of start coming up. And yeah, I went with number 3 for, again, it's Wrestle Kingdom month, isn't it? January, so no surprise. We're going with a Wrestle Kingdom match, and I went for it was a hard choice, but of the Wrestle Kingdom matches, I went for Kazuchika Okada versus Kota Ibushi from night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know, can we talk about this now, Jamesie? This is going to be an interesting discussion here, I think, for this one.
You go first, Benno.
Sure, I think I'm going to be the high man on this one. At the time, I rated it 4.75 when it came to watching this live. Now, I would say, and I think this might come into our discussion, sometimes rewatching Okada matches, when you're wrapped up into the moment, you can kind of forgive some of the slower stretches, shall we say, in the first half of his matches. I would say it's another matter when you're rewatching, and I do wonder, how much does that play into your rating? Do you change your rating at that point? What do you do? But I would still say I really enjoyed it. It's not my favourite match. Spoilers for my final couple of matches in my top 5. My favourite match from this weekend, but I still do really enjoy it as a match, kind of on its own merits. It's still one that I still think deserves discussion on a list like this. It's still a match where I think it's a match of big moments in a lot of ways. The kind of the first 20, are kind of leading to that big moment where Ibushi kind of goes into a trance moment, which maybe some people can give or take, but where that visual of him beating the shit out of Okada, it was every bit as visceral the second time I watched it as the first time I watched it. And again, the finishing stretch is still so great, even though in the result at this point, that is something for me that kind of held up in the final third of the match, with Ibushi kind of having a lot of counters for Okada's big stuff, but ended up coming short in the end. And it's a match that I've seen a lot of people hand out 5s for. I don't, where I said earlier, I'm a bit of a coward sometimes, and I'll say 4.75 when maybe I should say 5. I don't think this is, maybe I'd have to go back and listen to the audio on Spotlight at the time recorded, but I don't think I was considering a 5 for this, but I was happy with my 4.75 rating on it, and it was a big, it was your big Okada match, but with plenty of maybe Ibushi kind of and his tendencies maybe thrown in as well. And yeah, I just thought it was maybe not a masterpiece, but a match that just one of those. The big Okada matches don't always work for me, but this is one that worked for me, and I was live at the time, wrapped up in wanting Kota Ibushi to win and wanting them to go to that second day, and disappointed live in watching Okada go over as well. But as a match itself and as a spectacle, as a main event, I did think it was still a worthy main event of the first night. I don't know. I'm wondering though now, Jamesy, with it being fifth on yours, where you're going with this one.
Yeah, so but the first thing to say about this match is there is a general consensus that this is a great match. Like this, it's not giving a major spoiler to say this is the number one rated match on Grappl for January 2020 with like a 4.84 average. You think about that. Wow. There's basically nearly everybody is going between 4.5 and 4.75 on this match. So like the consensus is this is a great match. Meltzer gave this 5.5 stars, broke his scale, which means that I was looking at his list of all-time star ratings. That puts it, in his opinion, in the top 20 matches ever. Wow. So this is the level of praise that's been given to this match. Okay, and when I watched it in January, I gave it 4.5, and I liked it a lot. 4.5, very high rating. And it was before I went back and rewatched these matches, I already in my head had put it in somewhere in my top 5 for the month. You know what I mean? And I put it at 5 in my list, but it really drops down a lot on the rewatch for me. I could easily put any match from my honourable mentions in ahead of this. I put it in the top 5 because I kind of wanted to make the point about it almost, and I wanted to make sure it was discussed. But I could easily sub in any of my 8 or 9 honourable mentions ahead of it, And I actually put it back down to 4 stars after watching it again. Which in itself is a good match. And if it's a 4-star match, there's plenty to like about it. And I suppose let's try and be positive at the start. There are some amazing moments in this match for sure. Like you said, Benno, when that red mist descends on Ibushi, it's phenomenal. You could list off all the deathmatch wrestlers in the world and all the scary guys in wrestling. I think when that red mist descends on Kota Ibushi, he might just be the scariest wrestler in the world, because you honestly don't know what he's going to do. He's insane anyway. And it's almost like he kind of talks a lot about he doesn't really pre-plan his matches. And sometimes you wonder, what on earth is this guy going to do, And those stiff shoot, he was punching Okada in the face as he's lying on the mat. There's a kick that he delivers to him at one point, and you're thinking, we were talking about that Ishikawa match from Carrot a few weeks ago and how stiff that was. This was up at the level of any of that stuff, And that was an amazing moment in the match. And when that happened, I'm sitting up and I'm taking notice, and that's really good. And as you said, the closing stretch is absolutely stellar. Okada can do these in his sleep at this point. There's a kick out from a Kamigoye that's really, really good. At one point Okada drop kicks out of the Kamigoye. There's that big inside out German suplex that Okada takes on his neck. And Okada has to break out the Fire Thunder driver before the last Rainmaker to win it, So there's lots and lots of good stuff in it, but I just can't forgive the opening 20 minutes. And I made a point when I was watching the match, it was going slow for the first 5 minutes, and I took a stopwatch out on my phone and started timing it, because I wanted to time how long it was before something interesting happened in the match. And it doesn't really take off until the 22nd minute of the match, and that's the point where Ibushi has the red mist moment and just goes to town on Okada. Those first 22 minutes, very little happens. The only things that I put in my notes that were noteworthy was Okada breaking out, the red ink submission that he used to do back in 2013. Right, yeah. He did that, and that was quite unique. And the only other moment is when Ibushi kind of tries to do a bicycle kick and lands himself on the head, and that's a botch. I wouldn't even call that a great moment in the match. You remember it because he messed up a kick and spiked himself on the mat. But you know me, Benno, I do not have an aversion to slow wrestling, to technical wrestling. I don't mind a match having a slow build and there being a lot of technical stuff. I'll happily sit there and watch a Timothy Thatcher match every day for the rest of my life, which is entirely mat-based and which a lot of people will find boring. But there's a difference between good mat work and interesting mat work and compelling mat work and what they were doing here. They were doing nothing. They were rest holds. We'll bury Triple H and we'll bury Randy Orton for doing rest holds in the middle of matches. There's just nothing happens at all, And Okada, in a way, is the cleverest man in wrestling, because he will do these stellar closing stretches, and that's all we remember from the match. And it's, and we totally forget the first 20 minutes. How many times have you heard people say, the first half of the match was nothing, the second half was amazing, I give it 4.75? And it's like, at what point do we kind of start marking him down on these opening stretches, and it's not as if we will talk about another Okada match soon, where I found the opening stretches much more interesting, and I can kind of explain that when we talk about that match. But it just felt like you could easily, of those 22 minutes, you could easily have taken 10 to 15 minutes off. And the match would be no worse for it, and they could have had a really, really great 25-minute match, and it feels like they're just doing 40 minutes for the sake of it. And I read a few reviews of the match where people are saying you need the slow start to exemplify how great the fast finish is. And I understand that in principle, but you can still do something interesting within that slow start. I will always talk about Tanahashi as being one of the all-time greats in terms of the opening stretches of his matches. He'll always do interesting stuff. He'll focus on a body part, or he'll do some interesting things to keep you interested. Whereas in this match, it's like they sleepwalked through 20 minutes and then suddenly decided they were going to go to town on each other, And the other little structural issue I had, that moment where the red mist descends on Ibushi, it felt a bit weird that it was in the middle of the match. And if you had taken that and maybe put it in the last 5 minutes of the match and got some near falls out of it, maybe it would have made a lot more sense, because it's like the red mist descends on him for a while and he's kind of gone psycho with Ibushi, and then he kind of comes out of it and goes back to normal Ibushi. And maybe if they'd put that at the very end of the match, it would have had more impact and would have, it would have made more sense to me, So it's just, as I said, I don't hate this match. I don't think Okada's a bad wrestler. I don't want people going on Twitter after they hear this and saying, how can you say Okada's bad? It's none of that. But if Meltzer's saying this is a top 20 match of all time, if the consensus is that this match is a 4.84 average, I would really like people to explain why it's that good. You know what I mean? Because I just don't see it. You know what I mean? I think it's a good match, but I really, really don't think it's a great match.
I think the thing is, again, Meltzer's kind of undone his credibility a little bit with, the silly throwing out of, breaking his scale and acting like, every All Japan match he rated in the 90s is a full star, or in some cases 2 stars worse than, in the latest, Okada or Kenny Omega or whoever he decides to give 6 stars to this time. So I almost kind of throw that out of kind of my thought, with I kind of just think, you know what, Dave, it's 5-star plus. Let's just say that. Let's say it's 5, but you really feel strong about it. I think I wouldn't push back too harshly against your criticisms on it. I think for me, maybe the difference between it being a 5-star match and a 4.5 or a 4.75, which I gave it live when I watched it at the time, and maybe not for me, the difference between 5 and 4. But I am someone who will echo your point, and I think I've made the same point myself quite a few times. In that, yes, I do think sometimes people, I think as wrestling fans, I think you give us something shiny in the last 5 minutes, and a lot of the time, the first 15 minutes of a match just doesn't matter to people. And it doesn't matter to people when they rate it at all. I've definitely been guilty of that myself as well, because you just, I don't know, maybe we forget, maybe it's you have a couple of beers in your system, maybe it's just in general, that's the bit that we emphasise as the important, stretch in the match. Kurt Angle, as good as he is, made a career out of it, didn't he? At one point where exactly. His matches were basically, 15 minutes of the normal last 5 minutes of other people's matches. I think for me, I think the Okada opening stretch is too long. I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's the worst example of it. I've definitely seen worse. I think for me, you can get to that. I didn't really mind the Ibushi snapper moment coming in the middle of the match, because I think kind of like you said, it does jumpstart the match, and it does get us to...
It woke me up, yeah.
It gets us to the big stuff, doesn't it? And I think you can forgive the first 20 as kind of build into that moment, but I wouldn't strongly disagree with it. You can do that work in 5 minutes, or you can do that work in 10 minutes, or you can do that work in maybe a much more clever way. So I don't think you're out to lunch at all. Like I say, you're obviously, like you said, you're outside of consensus there, but that's what this is all about. And I don't think you're making bad points there. I think they're all points that, again, Okada, you're not doing him down because he's going to come up later on again.
Exactly.
He's someone who's made our lists twice. I always think for Okada, it's I think maybe we've all just gotten so used to it that we all forgive it. We all kind of go, yep, he bored the pants off me for 20 minutes, but my God, were those last 20 good. And we give him more leeway maybe than we would other wrestlers, in that situation. Maybe we kind of think, he knows what he's doing. It's all about, crowd control. Maybe that's the reason he does it. It's all about, maybe he knows, going into the epic last 20 minutes, people aren't going to think so much about the first 20. But I would say, it was a wider discussion, and we can talk about it again, a bit later on as well. I do think the Okada style, the Okada, again, the quieter first 20 and the great last 20, it's not a myth. It does exist. And I would say towards the end of last year, I felt a bit done with it. And I would say, his matches over this weekend maybe pulled me back a little bit. But I do think that's something you maybe start to hear, a little bit louder. So, yeah, maybe. But I think maybe we can rewind this audio in 6 months when people catch up. If, Okada does kind of continue to go down this path and does wind people up in that same way, maybe we will all start to look at him differently. But, yeah, I just think, for me, unashamedly would say the last 20 were good enough that, while maybe it stopped me from giving it 5 stars, it didn't hurt it enough for me to, go any less than I did. But yeah, still, again, it's one that it still would have made your honourable mentions, if not your 5th, wouldn't it, in this case? So it's not like, not like you're saying it's a 2-star match before people send all their hate mail to you, Jamesie.
No, I would say it's the first 20 minutes of a 3-star match and the last 20 minutes of a match of the year candidate. And in my head, the best way to deal with that star rate, it's very difficult to put a rating on that. So my best option is to split the difference and give it 4 stars. You know what I mean? And I think that's a fair rating, given my strong reservations about the first half of the match. And just very quickly, what you said about the Okada style. And it's almost like, as you said, he has done so much great work in the last 7 years in New Japan. It's like that story. I've been reading the story to my kids lately. The Emperor's New Clothes, where he's basically walking around naked, but because he's the Emperor, nobody has the balls to say to him, "You're not wearing any clothes." You know what I mean? And it's almost like with Okada matches, nobody wants to say that, God, it's not actually that great. You know what I mean? We've become used to him being great, and we hear from all the critics that he's great that we don't question. You know what I mean? Maybe this will be the podcast, Benno, where we'll question things a bit more, and we'll try and give a bit more honest analysis of these things. So that was your number 3, isn't that right, Benno? So
right.
We're going to have a bit of crossover here now, and we'll probably end up getting through things a bit more quickly. My number 3 is Will Ospreay against Hiromu Takahashi from the January 4th Wrestle Kingdom show, which I believe you will have higher. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah. We'll be talking about that in a bit.
Perfect. So we can move straight on to your number 2.
Okay. My number 2. Again, from Wrestle Kingdom weekend, and we're back to Okada Naito. Here we go again, Jamesie.
Perfect. Yeah, so I have that higher.
Right.
So we'll talk about that in a little while again.
Fair enough. This is the problem in it with top 5 podcasts.
Yeah. So we will get to that pretty soon. Now I have to confuse myself. That's your number 2. So my number 2 then, and we'll get to talk about both our number 1s then in a second.
That makes
my number
sense.
2
Do them together.
Yeah, I think it works better that way. So my number 2 is, again, I think an under-the-radar match, and one that people might need to find a bit of time to watch in the next while. It's from the 20th of January in Pro Wrestling Noah, and it's Dick Togo against Daisuke Harada. And it's the final of the Global Junior League there, that they kind of ran on the same night. They ran 2 semi-finals and then this final match. I gave it 4.5 stars. On Grappl, it's got an average of 3.95, but it's only from 30 people. So not many people have seen this match. So if people want a little bit of homework for the next few nights, that's a match for people to seek out and maybe bump up that star rating a little bit on Grappl and make it a bit more robust. And I'm quite glad that this match came straight after talking about the Ibushi Okada match, because in my head, this match is everything that match wasn't. I think there's a beauty in simplicity with wrestling, and this is a very, very simple match. You've got Harada, he's basically the ace of the junior division in Noah. And I would say maybe the most underrated wrestler out there. Like, he is as good as any junior in New Japan. Really good fundamentals, really great mind for the fine details of wrestling. And then you've got Dick Togo. And I'm on a Dick Togo buzz at the moment, Benno. I've based on seeing this match and based on watching a few other matches in the last while, I've been doing a deep dive of this guy. And like, you talk about a guy who doesn't get credit for how good he was. Dick Togo is genuinely an all-time great. He's one of the most versatile wrestlers of all time. Like he came through that Michinoku Pro promotion back in the 90s. So he's really adept at all the high flying and all the fast paced stuff that they used to do. He's a world class brawler. Like he throws a punch like anybody, as well as anybody in Memphis back in the 80s. He's technically sound. He can work well as a healer face. He's great longevity. Like he was blowing people away in the mid 90s, and he's still blowing people away here in 2020. The execution of his moves, like he throws a punch like nobody else. Like I said, his senton atomico is one of the most beautiful things in pro wrestling you will ever see. It's just out of this world. And the story of this match, it's basically it's about logic and psychology. They've both wrestled matches already this night. They both wrestled in their semi-finals. Togo won his match very quickly, whereas Harada kind of had to struggle to beat his opponent and went over 15 minutes. So Harada starts really, really hot, as if he wants to finish the match quickly. And the story of the match, basically, like it's a Jamesie special that you always call them on the British Wrestling Experience, Benno. Togo goes after Harada's leg, basically. And like Togo's work on the leg is just really focused, really vicious, really varied. This is the kind of stuff I'm taught when I'm criticizing the first 20 minutes of Okada Ibushi. I would say to people, as a counterpoint to that, watch the opening stages of this match. Watch the varied work that Togo does on the leg. Like he uses the guardrail, the ring post, really good dragon screws. At one point, he kind of goads Harada into swinging punches and missing, and then takes him down with a slight kick to the leg. There's a really, just a basic thing, like a really vicious kick to the knee when Harada is on the ground at one point. And every time he mounts any kind of a comeback, Togo goes back to the leg to cut him off. And like the real brilliant thing in this match is the selling by Harada. It's one of the most diligent displays of selling I've seen in a long, long time. Like when he's been dragged around the ring by Togo, he's hopping on one leg. Even when the focus isn't on the leg, he's kind of selling the leg. It's up there, if not better, than Tessa Blanchard's performance in selling the leg earlier that we talked about, you know. And the really great thing in the match, you know, the rule of threes in pro wrestling, where you do something twice and then the third time it hits. Basically, it's the tale of three bridging German suplexes that Harada throws. So he's working on this injured leg, and he hits a bridging German, but because the leg is so injured, he can't hold the bridge, and the knee buckles under him. And later in the match, he tries again, and he has to lift the leg up off the canvas, that one-legged bridge that I was talking about in the Makabe match. And again, he can't keep the weight on one leg, so he buckles. And it's only when he fires up and powers through the pain and does that, you know, the classic fighting spirit you see in a Japanese wrestling match. It's only on the third attempt that he finally gets this bridge and wins the match, you know. So it's probably a match. I know you told me that you watched it and you maybe were raising your eyebrows a little bit about why I had it on the list. To me, it's that simplicity, you know what I mean? And like, I want logic in wrestling. I want good psychology. I want good selling. I want things happening for a reason. And I want something that happens early in the match to have consequences in the match later. You know what I mean? And I suppose that's my key criticism of the Ibushi Okada match. Nothing happened in those 20 minutes at the start that had any consequence later on. You know, and if they had filled that, and we're going to talk about Naito Okada, where kind of more things like that happened, and I rated the match higher because of it. In this match, everything had consequence. There was struggle in it. There was, the story of the younger guy and the old timer trying to kind of take him out by being clever and working the leg. Just a lovely, simple match, and a match that I adore. I adored it when I saw it the first time. When I watched it back, I loved it every bit as much the second time. This is my wrestling, you know what I mean? And I think there's probably going to be lots of matches like this when I do my top fives in the course of this podcast over the year. This is the stuff that I like. And this, I want to try and put a spotlight on this kind of wrestling because I think it gets underreported. Like, it's not the kind of thing that Meltzer really appreciates. It's not the kind of thing he breaks down in his matches. I think Meltzer prefers the fireworks and the big moves in matches and the big finishing stretches. Whereas I'm just as happy with a nice little simple match like this, you know?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you said Jamesie special, and that's what it is. You know, I gave it 3.75. I believe what's the Grappl average on this? 3.95.
You're just around the average. Yeah.
Of the the ones in the Grappl top 10 and the the Grappl top matches in general, this is one where it's maybe got a lower viewership. I think there's only 30 people who've rated it. So that kind of goes against matches like this as well. But that's what the podcast is for, isn't it? To kind of highlight them.
Yeah.
I would say I gave it, like I said, I gave it 3.75. So definitely not a match where I'm saying I didn't like it. But also, not a match where it's going to get it, in my top 5. To me, I enjoyed watching Dick Togo go, how old is he now? 50-something? Like, my God, like, you know what I mean? The fact that he can...
Well into his 50s, yeah.
Oh, the fact that he's still going, he's somebody who, people will know from, Attitude Era and kind of raise their eyebrow.
Of course, yeah.
That he's still going now. He turned up in all the WCW games on the N64 as well. He did well, Dick Togo on that, was it World Tour he was in as a character. He always used to play as him. But the fact that he can still go to this degree, was genuinely impressive. I thought Harada, for his part, hitting the big German suplexes and kind of the fight that he brought to the match was really good as well. But yeah, it was, to be honest, it was a simple match, and I don't mean that as a slight. It was just straightforward, wasn't it? It was Harada's selling and just Togo like a dog with a bone, persistently, constantly, going for the leg, and that can be something that maybe to people on the outside can sound, maybe a bit bland, but in a way it kind of gave the match more stakes. It felt, I don't know, it felt like there was an emotion to it as well, and in the I think the selling was that good that kind of brought that out, and it just felt like one of those matches where it aimed your way into it. Again, I watched it as something that maybe I wouldn't ordinarily watch, and I walked out of it with an appreciation for both men, even if it wasn't something maybe the crack 4 for me. I would make my 5. I can certainly see why it's one as a package, as a match. It'd be one that you'd be screaming from the rooftops about, Jamesie.
Absolutely, and as I said, I don't expect everybody to give high ratings to this match, but I would say give it a chance, and bear in mind what I spoke about with the Okada Ibushi match. You know what I mean? And think about what's done in this match in the opening stages and what's not done in that match. You know what I mean? And as I said, more and more as I get older, I'm more into the fine detail of matches, and I will only call a match great if it's good bell to bell, and if there's good stuff in those opening segments. More and more, those opening stages of matches have just become more important to me, and I can't just keep hand-waving nothing happening or stuff happening for no reason, So it actually happened really nicely that we got to discuss those two matches side by side, because I think there's a lovely contrast between the two of those, a 20-minute match and a 40-minute match. So yeah, as I said, one for people to have a little look at if they haven't seen it before. So Benno, we're both at our number ones at this stage, and I think people will probably have figured out what they are at this stage if they've heard what we've said earlier. What's your match of the month for January 2020, Benno?
Yeah, I think if anything's going to give you an indication of maybe our tastes, or my taste specifically in general, my number one's going to give it away. And yeah, it's maybe not one that people would have on the night said was the match of the night or the match of the weekend, but on rewatch held at the most. Hiromu and Will Ospreay. I went in with an open mind, Jamesie, as to rating these 3 big Wrestle Kingdom matches over the weekend, and as you'll know, like right up until the last minute, I was kind of going back and forth myself, and actually this evening rewatched all 3 of them. I watched 2 Okada matches back to back. James, you're moaning about those first 20 minutes. That was it was fine. Still 2 very good matches, but yeah, I think there's just something about this match that is just so special, and that is maybe because Okada, while we might disagree on some points, I think we both agree Okada has been so good for so long that he's had a lot of matches like the Ibushi match and like the Naito match that are maybe going to stick in the memory more in, say, 10 years. Whereas I honestly feel like I'm going to be talking about this Hiromu Ospreay match in 10 years, and I'm going to be thinking about it as one of my favourite matches of all time. I feel this is the one where I do feel like a cow for not giving it 5. Again, old Dave Meltzer went 5.5, so maybe I should have followed his lead. But it really it's the combination of things. This was not even first class, like past first class, athletic wrestling, which is something that I'm maybe more into than the most. But it was not just that; it was the emotional element of Hiromu's return. Believe it or not, there was some very good selling in the match, I thought, as well. But again, it was a match that knew what it was, and it was just a all guns blazing match between two of the best in the world at this point. Like, it felt like the exclamation mark on Will Ospreay's year, because I think we all knew Ospreay was great, and I know this it bled into this year, but it kind of felt like an underscore of what he's done over this last year. It felt like moving into the heavyweight division in New Japan, probably we all would have argued should have happened a year ago. But then, it was great getting to see, as a novelty, him in the G1, as still a junior, mixing up with Okada and Tanahashi. They felt like big matches for him as, in moving up in his career. Even like, the curmudgeonly people who wouldn't want to like a wrestler who works in the style of Will Ospreay. I think those performances over the G1 turned some people around. And I think this is kind of the accumulation of it all as well. And I think for his part as well, Hiromu, going in, how many of us probably said that, why are they letting Hiromu come back and do these ridiculous tags and not making his first match back with Will Ospreay? Did it hurt at all? It didn't. If anything, I feel like it made it better. He got that warm-up, didn't he? You know what I mean? It was it's your Premier League player coming back and playing with the under-21s. He kind of got himself back into match shape, and we might not have got a match this good if he didn't do it. It is a match where it's just next level flying intensity, but next level meaning behind it as well. And it's just so well structured. They do go quite quickly, into the big stuff. It's not long before they're on their apron and Hiromu's hitting that senton onto the outside, and things do kind of escalate quickly, and you get that Sasuke special gift that people might moan about GIF wrestling in 2020, but that's a gift that's got to live on. Where Ospreay misses it. Then he kind of Hiromu tries to do the German on the ramp, and Ospreay flips over that, ducks under him, goes into the ring, and then hits the Sasuke special. Like, that is like, as far as like just perfect timing. Like, you just don't see wrestling that good. Or I suppose spot wrestling maybe does it down, but that kind of wrestling done that good, it is just next level. And absolutely love the match, and I just absolutely love both of these wrestlers. I felt like all of the near falls felt particularly earned. I feel like I do think that real life story of Hiromu managing to scratch and claw his way back into being a full-time New Japan wrestler again does kind of play in the back of your mind. And while they don't go after maybe the injury as much as you might have expected, and might have been done with a different opponent, there's little bits of it in there, and there's little bits of it when when Ospreay hits the the hidden blade, you still cringe. You cringe every time he does it, to be honest, but you cringe even more when it's with Hiromu. And there was a point in the match actually when I rewatched it today where when Hiromu hits the time bomb, that would have been fine as the finish. I would have probably still given this 4.75, but they do the kick out, and I bought it again. I bought it, only months later, 4 or 5 months later, and I'm still buying. That is the big near fall, and he hits his crazy new finish. And this was just next level wrestling watching it live, and as much as anything I've rewatched it, it really, really held up on second viewing as well. So maybe that's why it pipped the two Okada matches for me to be my number one, but maybe it's a style thing, because I do love this style and I do love Will Ospreay. But for me it was the number one match of January, and one that I'm expecting end of the year when we come to do our top 10s for the year, that it's going to be a contender for number one there as well. Just absolutely love this one, Jamesie. And again, but I think I'll stick with the 4.75, but I could, depending on what you say now, maybe I could be convinced to change that to a 5. It's a coin flip for this one, to be honest. It's a real close one that I absolutely loved.
Well, I always say, Benno, if you're in doubt about a 5, then it's not a 5.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
It's a feeling almost. You know when it's a 5, and if you are in doubt, you have to put the 4.75 on it. That's always my rule anyway,
Yeah, that's like when we talk about it as well. I always find this when we do Spotlight, where I'll be like justifying why I knocked the 2.25 off, rather than talking about why I loved it so much to give it 4.75. It's not a slight in any way.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I had this at number three, absolutely loved it. The Grappl users had it as their number three as well. 4.76 average. Like there's nothing between the top few matches on the Grappl list. Like you're
No.
talking 100ths of a star rating. You know what I mean? So this is basically is, and Meltzer gave it 5.5 as you said. I was a bit lower. I went 4.5, but like absolutely love this match for all like, and you've broken it down very well, Benno, like, and I don't have a massive amount to add to that. It's a fireworks match, as you said. It very much knows it's a fireworks match. It is not in any way apologetic about it, and let's face it, do we want to see Osprey and Hiromu rolling around on the mat for 10 minutes before they do all the good stuff? We don't, and given how long some of the other matches went on this show, I felt they pitched it perfectly for the position it was on the card and given what was going to come afterwards as well, and like, I think a thing that they both deserve great credit for, not just from this match, but as wrestlers in general, was that the Tokyo Dome crowd was loud and invested in this match. And like, how many years did we come to the junior match in the Tokyo Dome, and no matter how good the match was, and no matter how good the wrestlers were, no matter what they did, the crowd was dead. For a long, long time, that Tokyo Dome crowd just didn't react to juniors. It didn't react to junior heavyweight wrestling. And there was just silence, even though they were doing great things. And it says a lot about how those two guys have been built up and how much of a star both of those guys are now in New Japan, that the crowd love this match and we're going crazy for it, I did think, I do think there was a bit of focus on the neck, and I do think it was almost like Osprey kind of said to himself in storyline, I'm going to test out this guy's neck. He does a lot of the moves are aimed at the neck and that kind of thing. As you said, there's a kind of a sense of danger to it. He takes some big bumps on that neck, like that hidden blade that he takes. You are cringing, but like, I can't lie if I can't say that sense of real danger, it's an awful thing to say, but it kind of adds to the match, doesn't it, in a way? You know what I mean? That little bit of discomfort, you're suspending reality a little bit. It does make the match a little bit better. The Sasuke special spot. I'm glad you described it and I didn't have to, Benno. And even when you're saying it, it sounds contrived and it sounds like the worst thing in the world. But the way they executed it, like, it was flawless. It was perfect. And the margin for error on that is zero. If that goes wrong, they just look like a pair of idiots. You know what I mean? But of course, those two pulled it off, And you talked about the hidden blade. I really liked how they teased it and built up to it. Like, there was twice Hiromu kind of avoided it. The first time he collapses, the second time he ducks. So when Osprey hits it the third time, it feels even more special. It feels like a complete kill shot. And you can't help but think of Wrestle Kingdom 13. Remember when he completely knocked out Ibushi, he concussed Ibushi with the hidden blade the year before? You're thinking back to that, and now you have this guy with a legitimately injured neck. All these thoughts are going through your head, and it's adding to the experience of the match, My one little criticism of it, I think, is I didn't like Hiromu he used the Canadian Destroyer, I think, 3 times in the match. And like, I'm not a fan of that as a move once in a match. I do think 3 times in a match is a little bit of overkill, and that kind of was annoying me a little bit. I liked the fact that he had to invent a totally new move to beat Osprey finally.
Love
I
a good
feel
kill
like
finish.
Yeah, but it elevates Osprey because Osprey has been a heavyweight wrestling the juniors and beating everyone for the last year. You know what I mean? So I think it's appropriate that Hiromu has to invent a new move to beat him. That's what you have to do to beat this guy who's been such a dominant ace of the division, So even though Osprey is now a heavyweight and he's losing to another junior, it doesn't sit badly with you. You feel like that's appropriate, that he had to invent this crazy head drop move just to put him away, And actually, this went up for me on rewatch. I think I had it at maybe 4.25 the first time I watched it, bumped it up to 4.5. I don't have any arguments. If this is your best match of the month, it's not like the Ibushi Okada match where I have major issues. I have no problem with this. This is state of the art fireworks wrestling, and it's just phenomenal stuff. It's just, it's not my style of wrestling, but when people do it this well, I have no problem with it. You know what I mean? But it has to be this good for me to like it almost,
Yeah, I think that's the story of Osprey this last year, I think even the people who aren't gonna like a style like this, it's normally not gonna be for them. He's just so good at it that you can't really argue, can you? And yeah, I think it's another perfect storm one. I think I would have loved it personally. Would it have been my number one over the two big Okada matches if it didn't have Hiromu in it, if it didn't have the sympathetic guy underneath as well, just to get, like you said, to give it that level of danger and to give it that level, maybe extra level of emotional investment. But what's a match if it's not the sum of its parts? And yeah, I just thought it was perfect for that. And yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, maybe Ospreay's got in his locker, but this style of match, this is as good as you can maybe do with this style of match. But give Ospreay. I think give him this time off where he seems to be putting about 30 pounds on in pure muscles as a heavyweight in lockdown. Maybe we'll see when he comes back. But yeah, this was a match that just made me really excited for Ospreay's 2021, and it kind of showed how while we all might have thought they're keeping him in the junior division, maybe they think a lot of Ospreay, but maybe not quite as much as we do. It was quite clear in the presentation of him here. Him getting in the G1 last year, and just how his 2021 was shaping up. How much faith they've got in him for this year, and also for Hiromu, how much faith they've got in Hiromu to kind of now they've got the guy who can be the next guy to be the guy in the division.
Exactly.
They don't need Ospreay there anymore, do they? They've got Hiromu, and it was so. That's the big thing for me. It was just so great to see him back. Like I was convinced he was another Shibata, and we weren't seeing him again. Like I really, as those months went by where it did, there was rumours he was coming back and he never turned up. I was really worried, and I do think that plays a part as well. That emotional connection to him as a wrestler. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely love that match, and quite happy with it. We're being number one. I'm glad it featured on yours as well, James, because I think you were considering leaving it off entirely, weren't you, for a point? So I'm glad I encouraged you to rewatch that if I achieved anything.
Oh yeah, I had 5 in my head, and it was the one that was on the brink where I was thinking, God, maybe I can squeeze something else in, because I knew you'd talk about it anyway. But once I watched it, I can't make a list of top 5 and keep that off. It just really is that good, So that brings us to my number one then, Benno. And again, by the powers of deduction, I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody. My number one match was your number 2. So we're not far apart. My number one match was from the 5th of January, the next night, Kazuchika Okada against Tetsuya Naito for the IWGP Heavyweight title and IC title. A match that has a Grappl average of 4.84, exactly the same average as Okada. I think Okada Ibushi gets above it by 100 of a star rating or something like that. Meltzer only gave it 5, which is...
Oh, right.
Meltzer's the low man on it. I went 5 on it. I went 5 on this as well. I really think this is a special match. And in a way, it's Okada proving me wrong. I can't write off Okada as a wrestler and say Okada only does bad openings to matches now, because I can't level any of the criticisms I made of Okada Ibushi at this match. I was into this match from start to finish, bell to bell. A lot of it was Naito. I don't know, did you notice him? He didn't do a lot of the kind of stuff that Naito will do. He didn't do the stalling. You know what I mean? He didn't do the LIJ shtick at the start of the match where he stalls and goes outside the ring and wastes 5 minutes doing that, trying to frustrate his opponent. I think the idea was he was trying to put across that this is my big chance. I'm super focused. This isn't the time for playing games. You know what I mean? And I'm not a major Naito fan. I have not enjoyed him for the last year or two. Apparently, in his defense, he's been working with some injuries. Apparently, there was some problem with his vision, that he's wrestled the whole last year with some kind of issue with his vision. His knees are obviously clearly in a bad way. Like, you can see that big strapping on them. So, I'll give him a pass on, the fact that he will sleepwalk through a G1 and maybe give 2 or 3 killer performances towards the end. And again, they're the matches we remember, So he's a guy who will sleepwalk through a lot of matches. He relies on shtick and that kind of thing. He relies on the LIJ gimmick a lot. There was none of that here. It was super focused. The opening sequence straight away. I watched the Ibushi match and the Naito match back to back, and the difference in the opening segments of this match, it was quick paced. It was. There was a plan on Naito's part. He was trying to go after Okada's neck. At one point, he does a kind of a hanging neck breaker off the apron on Okada and literally points at his own neck as if to say, I'm going to go after this guy's neck and soften it up for my finisher, And again, one good thing about Naito is there's always this kind of inherent logic to his matches. A lot of the things he does in a match will focus on the neck. in order to set up the finisher, the Destino, where he dumps his opponent on their neck, basically, you know. So I do like that about him. And it's a thread you can sink your teeth into throughout his matches, you know what I mean? And I felt like he kind of will always go back to the neck in the match. Did you watch the English commentary or the Japanese commentary for this, Benno?
I watched the English commentary for it.
English, yeah. I thought they were superb. I think those guys do a great job at the best of times. I thought they were amazing in this. Do you remember at a few points in the early stages, they were trying to spot little things like, is Naito a little bit nervous? They're talking about the stutters in his footwork and that kind of thing, and saying, God, is he a little bit nervous? Is he going to bottle it again? You know what I mean? And they were taking the stance that we can't see Okada being beaten by Naito here. We think he's going to bottle it again. You know what I mean? Like Chris Charlton is talking about 2 years ago when he didn't do it and that kind of thing. It really brought the match up for me. The detail those guys go into, you know what I mean? And I love that they will always spot limb work in matches. They'll see him going after the neck. They'll tell that story for the viewer. You know what I mean? I just think they're phenomenal at their jobs. Of course, like, I think this is a really great match, but I think that the moment in it when I knew it was 5 stars is the Stardust press. When he climbs the ropes and hits that Stardust press, where 2 years before his fatal mistake in not beating Okada was climbing those ropes and hesitating and missing he had Okada beaten 2 years ago, but he had to go up to the top rope and be flashy and hit that move as a nod to his past, and it's what cost him. And this time he goes to the top rope and he nails it. And like, that's just your 2 years of storytelling. Your payoff is 2 years later. You know what I mean? People were so angry that Naito lost that match 2 years ago, and we were all up in arms. None of us could believe that he lost that match. And lo and behold, we get the payoff 2 years later, and you look back now and you realise what a genius bit of booking it was that he didn't win then so that we got this moment now. You know what I mean? And that callback and that moment and like the urgency of him, like when Okada kicks out of the Stardust press, he doesn't hesitate. He goes straight into his normal sequence of finishers and wins it clean in the middle of the ring. You know what I mean? I just feel like it's an interesting match from start to finish. It never drags. Both guys have a clear plan. Naito goes after Okada's neck. Okada goes after, there's the injured knee as well, Benno. You know, like the night before, Jay White has destroyed Naito's knee. Every time Okada's in trouble in the match, the knee is his insurance policy. He'll attack that knee and it kind of slows Okada down, you know. So you have a very obvious game plan on both their parts. You have an amazing callback with the Stardust press. You get the usual stellar closing stretch, and it's not too much. Sometimes those closing stretches can be too much. It ends decisively. It ends cleanly. And then to cap it all off, that lovely emotional moment where Naito's doing his speech at the end, and he says something about Okada and gives him praise and credit. And Okada does, you know, he's been carried out by the young boys and he raises his fist in the LIJ signal as if to say, I finally respect you. You know what I mean? And you just have the great storytelling you get in long term from New Japan. This is just great stuff for me. You know what I mean? I gave it 5 at the time. Watching it back, no problem giving it 5 stars. Just an amazing match, and it probably will take a lot for this to be beaten for match of the year for me, to be honest. I suppose especially in the year we're having now, but even in a normal year.
Wow, yeah. Hard to follow that, really, Jamesie. Like, yeah, you've summed it up, really. This is a match that will be in or around my top 10. I mean, it'll be in my top 10, I'm certain of it. It's just a question of where, but it's very likely going to be in the top. And I tell you what, Jamesie, like, listening to you talk then, it kind of reminded me about how, like, watching this live at the time, how much at the time I didn't want to see Naito in this position. Like, I don't know about you, true. But, like, going into this weekend, I think it's easily forgotten now, but I didn't... Okay, you can, don't get me wrong, you can categorically say the long-term build is there for this, for Naito to get this moment with Okada. But short-term, I really wasn't feeling it. It didn't feel like...
Yeah, same as, yeah.
Naito and Jay White on that first night, like, we might mention that in honourable mentions, but it won't be me, I promise you. It's like, I didn't want to see either of them. I hated the tournament idea. I really just didn't enjoy it in execution. It felt like a good idea at one point, and then it just felt kind of lazy. And the in-ring promo segments they did with the lads just wasn't. The whole story didn't grab me. So like, I spent maybe the night one Naito Jay White match, as well as some of my misgivings about Jay White kind of sulking it. I think I remember tweeting on the night I wanted to see Okada and Ibushi again the second night rather than see this.
Yeah,
to be honest, it's higher on my list out of the two matches, and it is the one that I just about preferred as well. So they kind of showed me here, to be honest, and I think it was, like you say, the early stages of the match where Naito looked nervous, but not even that, just the way he walks out, and you can see on his face this is different. This is he looks as serious as he's looked, and I think the biggest praise I can kind of give it is to a match, and to go to maybe some maybe the criticisms you held about the other Okada match on this. This was one that didn't feel like 35-40 minutes, or I think it was like 30 minutes, something like that. It didn't feel like that at all, even on rewatch. And I came in with some trepidation about watching two long Okada matches as good as they are back to back in a night, and it grabbed me again a second time out, and I did give it strong consideration to be my number one. I'm happy with going with Ospreay Hiromu, but on another day, I could have easily gone with this too. And for all the reasons you mentioned there, it was just such a well worked match, and both men played the roles so good. I loved Okada kind of soaking up those boos a little bit, when he kind of just kept going after that Naito's knee, just kept going for it. I love those little moments in the match as well. And it's a match where, like you said, that big moment at the end when Okada gives kind of his respect to Naito, and obviously they run the Kenta angle afterwards, which maybe took some wind out of some people's sails and might explain why maybe some might prefer the Ibushi match. Maybe that left a bad taste in some people's mouths. But as you touched on there, the moment of Naito getting his crowning moment that those poor Naito fans have been screaming for 2 years, and they probably have to listen to people like me for the last year going, I'm sick of Naito, sick of broken down Naito. I don't want to see him do these same matches where he lands on his head over and over again. I'm done with Naito as a top line guy. It was clear watching this match. The New Japan ticket buying public are not sick of Naito as a top line guy and wanted to see this. And it was, it was one for the, maybe Gator was rightful though, where over the long term, maybe they could have done this last year instead, but it had even more of an emotional punch having that, I suppose, patience to give us it a year later. And that makes it hard for me to kind of separate how big a moment that felt from, how good the match it was. I think the two things really bleed into each other. I think that's why this works so well. And a lot of time with 5-star matches, I think that's, the way it can go. Again, I was 4.75 on it, but another close one for me. And another one that will feature in my top 10 at the end of the year, unless we have an incredible winter once we do start getting wrestling back again. But I can totally see why it's your number one, Jamesie.
Yeah, and the highest praise I can give it is exactly what you said, Benno. I am not a Naito guy. I am not a Naito fan. I didn't particularly want to see him in this position. I didn't really feel like it was a story worth telling. But by the end of the match, they got me. You know what I mean? And I was getting the hairs on the back of my neck standing up when he climbs the ropes and hits that Stardust press. So like when you're emotionally invested in a match with a guy you don't particularly like, everyone concerned, the booker, the two wrestlers, they have all done their job perfectly. You know what I mean? And that's the highest praise I can give it. I was supporting Naito and I was genuinely emotional to see him get his moment, and that's pro wrestling, and that's the greatness of it. When you can get someone's real life emotions like that, that's all you can ask for, So there you go. That's our two top fives, Benno. I think two varied lists. Like, it was always going to be New Japan heavy, wasn't it? Given the month that it is, I think if we ever do this in Januaries in future years, there will always be 2 or 3 big New Japan matches because it's Wrestle Kingdom. They always push the boat out. They always deliver the match of the year candidates, don't they?
Oh yeah, I remember when we were talking about doing this podcast and we were like, maybe we can tie January and February together. God help us if we were trying to do that.
No.
Yeah, that's just what January is, isn't it? And there's it's a big month for Japan in general, so that's going to explain maybe some of the Grappl 10 and some of the mentions we'll mention too. But at the end end of the day, it's Wrestle Kingdom month, isn't it? So I think there was no doubt that 2 to 3 of these matches. I think if most of the listeners put a top 5 together, you're gonna get maybe not the same 2 or 3. You're gonna get your Wrestle Kingdom matches at least playing part in your top 5. That's just what January is on the wrestling calendar at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. And as I said, matches that I'm glad I watched them back, because I remember watching them live. Remember how early in the morning it was over here? Like, we were getting up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday and a Saturday, and it was, you're tired. Like, basically, my opinion on all 3 matches changed, and I changed my ratings for all. No, apart from the main event, my ratings changed for the other 2. Like, so it just goes to show the mood you're in and how you're feeling watching a match can really alter it. Like, when you look back with fresh eyes a few months later, it could really change it, you know. So we're maybe next going to have a look at the Grappl top 10. Benno, have you got it in front of you there as well?
I do have it, yeah.
Yeah, so just to go down through it, and some of our honourable mentions will come up in this as well. So obviously the number 1 for the month was Okada Ibushi. Number 2 was Okada Naito. And as I said, 100th of a star rating between them, nothing between them basically. And just behind was Ospreay Hiromu, at 4.76. There's a match I see in your honourable mentions there, Benno. Another Will Ospreay match. It's at number 5 on the Grappl list with a 4.43 average. And it's Dowie James against Will Ospreay from MCW on the 11th of January, and this is a match I think you enjoyed. Did you get to rewatch it again, or?
I did, yeah. I mean, this was one that kind of, I wouldn't say flew under the radar, but it was like all of a sudden everybody was talking about it. As this big Ospreay match. I think I've seen people go 4.75 on it. I've seen people talk about it as like the high level Ospreay match. I think it's Ospreay against an opponent who's maybe not quite at that level yet. But all the pieces are there, like as a shitbag heel, as someone who can go in the ring as well. I do think maybe there's a bit of I wouldn't say there's a whole load of Australians giving it hometown bias on the app, but I do think maybe I wouldn't consider it a match of the month contender, but I'm glad that I went and got it out and gave it a rewatch, because there's moments of brilliance in the match. Like I say, it's like watching the way Brit Res Indies should be presented, and I do think Ospreay's got a habit of going to these places and bringing the best out of opponents that maybe aren't quite on near his level yet, but clearly have all the mechanics in there that might get them there. So I can't see why people rated it so highly.
Yeah, I'd be the same as you, Benno. I thought it was a good Ospreay match, but like Will Ospreay is churning out great matches all the time. I think it would be in the kind of second tier of matches. Like, I could probably, if I looked back at my spreadsheet from last year, I'd say there were probably 20, if not 30 Ospreay matches that were better than this. Now, number 1, that shows you how good Will Ospreay is. But I do think maybe some people went a little bit overboard on this match with the praise. Like, I think Meltzer went 4.5 to 4.75 on it. I just don't see it at that level. I see it as an Ospreay performance where he comes into a kind of a new indie and elevates a guy who's way below him in terms of ability, And I did like Dowie James. He thought he was good as a heel, looked like a good all-rounder, like some of his mat work was good. He can do the flashy stuff. But clearly Ospreay bringing a guy up to his level, Nice little bit of selling of the. I think Ospreay legitimately injured his foot in the match, and I think they made a little bit of that throughout the match. Thought the finish was a little bit sudden and out of nowhere. I would say if people are looking for a match from that MCW Vendetta show, and you're looking to kind of find 2 guys that you've never heard of before, there's a match on that show from Danny Psycho against Royce Chambers, they're called. And I would say it's actually a better match than this. And again, if people want a little bit of homework and something to seek out in the next few weeks or months, have a look at that match, because that's just 2 guys who kind of blew me away as being guys I'd never heard of before and put on a serious performance, Anything else on that top 10 that was on your honourable mentions, Benno? Jake Lee Kento, did you see that match?
Yeah, I've got that on my list as well. That is one that kind of... Again, this is where, I'm going to go, okay, I see this in the Grappl top 10. I see this getting rated highly on the app. Yeah. I'm going to watch it. This is one that I believe that JP reviewed on Spotlight and was recommending people for. It's one where I go, 4.25 on. And I do think I kind of, in my honorable mentions, I had a bit of logjam of those kind of matches. Kenta Miyahara is one who, he's got his style, he's got his type of match, and he does it very, very well. And this is a story. It was one of those, that age old, David Starr can't beat Walter kind of situation. More with Jake Levy, and he's more of a cocky dick, I suppose, in that role, and it's more like he can beat him, but he can't beat him when it comes to the big one. For me, it was maybe just a touch long, I think, is what maybe hurt it for me. There were great moments in the match, but there were a couple of weird ref moments where I felt like I'm pretty certain Jake Lee's shoulder was up on the finish, and there was another near fall like that earlier in the match as well that maybe slightly hurt it as well. Maybe again, I don't want to talk it down as a 4.25 star match. Maybe just to explain why it didn't make my list, and maybe the fact that I'm not following All Japan full time bars me from maybe having the emotional involvement in the match that others would, that would make it a slam dunk for other people's top fives. But it would certainly be in my top 10 if not there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I had that. The Grappl users have that at number 6 with a 4.38 rating. And with 121 people rating it as well. So a very robust average rating there. It's clearly a lot of people are watching All Japan this year. I had it at 4 stars. I would say a solid start to Miyahara's year. I don't buy Jake Lee as a top guy yet. I just feel like he's a work in progress. I feel like he was a little bit swallowed up kind of by Miyahara in this match. I know that some of the All Japan fans will be very angry hearing that. I just feel like Miyahara is the guy in All Japan at the moment. And there's a group of kind of guys, Jake Lee. I actually prefer Naoya. I always mispronounce that first name, Nomura. He's kind of the guy who I feel is having the best matches with Miyahara at the moment. And if anybody should kind of rise up from that new generation, I think it should be him next, maybe. I just feel like Jake Lee I think he will get there, but I just don't think he's top guy material yet. But the great thing about Miyahara is he's just super consistent. I think I've had him in my top 10 in the world for at least the last 3 years, because he just has this formula now at this stage where he can plug just about anyone into it, have a great match, bang out the 4-star matches almost relentlessly, you know what I mean? So he's one of my favourite wrestlers, and a guy that I think we'll be talking about in months to come in top 5s of the month as well, Anyone else there, Benno, in your honourable mentions? Not necessarily. Did you have Jordan Devlin and Tyler Bates from NXT UK take over on yours?
I was going to say, with trepidation, I'm going to mention that I had that in my... it was never making my top 5, let's be clear, everyone. It would probably about pit my top 10. It's funny, when we reviewed that one, Jamesie, I think I was definitely the high man out of the 4 of us when we did it over on BWA. And I think, you and Joe particularly explained why you went into it. It's a popcorn match completely, and it's a lower tier of, popcorn shootout. Not really too much of a story to it kind of match. I get it. I get why you guys hated it on the night. I think the real problem is, the shadow looming over it, in January was, well, we just finished talking about how good, Jordan Devlin's performances were at OTT. And then rather than that, this great Scorsese, Coppola kind of, layered matches that he'd been doing in OTT. Here you get your blockbuster match with let's be honest, a very rowdy but obnoxious crowd doing their UK chants and "Are you watching Vince McMahon?" And I think there was even a shit Finn Balor that got thrown in there early. But I think even all that aside, I think it is one of those matches where, let's be honest, this is a 4 to 4.25 star match. It's no, I think 4.25's, being generous to it as high as you can realistically go. I think Meltzer actually went 4.5 on it, which I just think is way too much for a match like this. But it's a match where those last 10 minutes, as far as that big, if you want to call it just a sport and kind of shootout kind of match, those last 10 are great. The boxer moment got some derision for it, but I didn't mind it. Yeah. I enjoyed the strikes on the floor. I enjoy every time Devlin pulls out that that backdrop he does, where he kind of pulls them in by the arm. The desperation, I think, in those last 10 minutes of the two of them trying to win in front of what was, a crowd that we will critique, and I think I just slipped a few in there. We're red hot for those big moments. They were there. I think Bate was really good. The moment that sticks out in the match for me is that desperation when he goes up to the top for the spiral tap, where he's just got to win this thing. He's just got to put this guy away. Totally get it. Not a match for everybody as far as the style goes. Very popcorn, but I think it's a very good old popcorn match. So I did want to give it a bit more love than maybe I had the chance to give when we did talk about it on that takeover review.
Yeah, and a match that we both had in our honourable mentions and that made the Grappl top 10 was at number, what number is it there? It's number... Oh yeah, number 4. Actually, number 4. It was basically the next best match according to the Grappl users after Wrestle Kingdom of the month was Kaito Kiyomiya against Go Shiozaki from the Noah show on the 4th of January. And like, I really, really like this. I think we both had it on our honourable mentions. I gave it 4.25. Just a really epic feeling Noah main event, and like Noah is a promotion that has slipped so badly when you go back to the early to mid 2000s, and like they were basically the New Japan of the time, and look how far they've slipped. I just felt like it was a match that the crowd was really hot for. It's a really nice redemption story for Go Shiozaki. Like he was basically entrusted with the role of the ace of Noah after Misawa died, and it was just too early for him. And he failed in the role of the ace, and it's kind of been a thing that's kind of tarnished him ever since. And I feel like now he's ready. I feel like now he's a proper world-class wrestler. I feel like he can now carry the company on his shoulders, And Kiyomiya is a really, really good young talent. Like he had a really great year last year and was champion for a long run in Noah. And I feel like this was a nice point for him to lose the title. And I feel like in the future, Go Shiozaki can be his mountain to climb. You know what I mean? And I feel like you talked about the Walter Starr thing, have him keep losing to Go Shiozaki and eventually overcome him. You know what I mean? And I think that'll be the making of him as the ace of the company in the future. So I just felt it was a really good match. And as I said, I have no problem with it being in the top 10 Grappl.
Oh yeah, definitely, and it says how much where the mount has travelled that it's managed to crack that. I think this is another one of those matches where I think I would say a good chunk of the people rating their own Grappl, similar to me, are people who just aren't following Noah day to day. Let's be honest, and the jumping in, like you said, when a match like this gets rated so highly. For me, I mean, it's not one that I think it's one I wanted to mention just because of how high everybody had rated it. Again, I think maybe the emotional investment maybe hits it a little bit for me. As much as I can recognise how good what the guys are doing in the ring is, maybe that's what stops me, going from like a 4 or 4.25 to going higher, which a lot of people have on Grappl. I saw even a couple of 5s thrown out for it as well. But a very good match that deserves to be in the conversation, and the type of match that might bring a few more eyes to Noah. And it is a match there. I believe it's out there for free on YouTube as well, isn't it? That people can bring up as well. So you can find that too.
Yeah, and like just very briefly on Noah, I was kind of thinking about promotion of the month and that kind of thing, and I suppose let's leave New Japan out of it. Like if you've got a promotion with 3 matches and both our top 5s of the month and the top 3 matches on Grappl, clearly they're the promotion of the month. If I was to give a kind of a second place, I would actually say Noah had a really, really solid start to the year. Like between that match, between the Dick Togo match that I talked about, both semi-finals of that tournament that ended up with Togo and Harada were really good. There's a really great match that I just briefly want to bring to people's attention as well. It was from the 4th of January and it was for the junior title in Noah between Hayata and the veteran Yoshinari Ogawa, who we talked about a little while back there on that UK show, Benno. You might remember him being in the ring with Misawa and those guys. It's only got a 3.83 average on Grappl. Only 47 people have rated it. But like I had this match at 4.5 stars, and it very much falls under the category of the Togo Harada match, where it's just a completely simple, logical match. Again, it's a younger guy like Hayata, who I don't rate him very well. He's kind of a high-flying guy who I've never thought he was good enough to be kind of the junior champion in Noah. And Ogawa, the veteran, just comes in here, and I would say it's probably the best carry job I've seen of the month, where he just literally takes this guy by the scruff of the neck and guides him through this probably 15 to 20 minute match, where he just relentlessly works over Hayata's leg over and over and over. Doesn't even give him a chance not to sell it because he just stays on the leg so much. And it's just an amazing example of an experienced veteran carrying a younger guy to a really good match. So it's just an under-the-radar match for people to have a look at. And the other honourable mention I just really want to talk about is, I mentioned Judas Icarus earlier and his match against Makabe in 3-2-1 battle. And he had another match on the 17th of January in ECCW, which is another Pacific Northwest promotion. And it's him against a guy called Elliot Tyler. And it's an I Quit match. And these guys have had a prolonged feud in that promotion over the last 6 months, I think it is. And it has a real feel of Kevin Steen against El Generico, where they're former tag team partners. Things have gone amiss between them. And this match, I gave it 4.25. I could easily have gone higher on it. It's almost a death match. Like these two guys, two young, hungry guys trying to make a name for themselves. And there's just this great sense of hatred in the match. And there's some crazy stuff in it. Like at one point, Judas Icarus attacks Elliot Tyler's ear, which is something you don't see very often in a wrestling match. At one point, they bring a hammer into it. There's a really great spot with thumbtacks in the mouth. And just again, if people are, it's on YouTube. I'll put the link up on Twitter once the show drops. If people are looking for new people and looking for new wrestlers and looking to get in the ground floor on some young, hungry talent, that's a match I would highly recommend to people. Have you anything more in your honourable mentions, Benno?
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. I mean, you mentioned it already, and we talked about it. Daniel Makabe and Judas Icarus, just so good. And I made up you maybe watch that one. So that was in there. Chris Dickinson and David Starr, one from GCW.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a man who keeps up with this GCW at the start. I missed them off the promotions I try to keep up with. They're a bit of a guilty pleasure, but every now and then, not even every now and then, they do tend to knock out these bangers. It was very much an indie banger. I couldn't have justified putting him a top 5, especially ahead of that All Japan and Noah stuff. But honestly, I think Starr was really good in it. As like they've kind of taken on his honorary Brit status and kind of working it as a bit of a heel in the match. Like not every big indie match, but like a lot of big indie matches, it's about the big closing stretch. It's about the Starr comeback at the end, and it's about the near falls as well. There is unfortunately, Jamesie, a Canadian Destroyer spot in there, but we'll forgive that. But it's very good, and there's a nice moment afterwards as well with Dickinson kind of endorsing Starr, which you can kind of tell he maybe wasn't a fan of in the past. I really enjoyed that. Did you catch up with that one before I go and say others?
Yeah, I had it a solid 4-star match.
Yeah,
I think on Grappl it's got a 4.16 average, so we're both kind of in and around on it. The thing we forget about Starr is, we've become so used to him telling these great big stories and having these great feuds and doing the great character stuff. You forget that you can just throw him into a match like this with no real build-up and he can still kind of blow the house down. You know what I mean? This is just really good, fast-paced, hard-hitting match. There's no huge story to it. I think he does work Dickinson's leg a little bit, and I had slight reservations about the fact that Dickinson kind of just blew it off towards the end and went into his closing stretch. But like for a US indie match, and like it's actually striking how little US indie stuff we have on our lists and how little we're mentioning them in the honourable mentions. This is about as good as it got for the US indies in January. And definitely, as I said, GCW, I think they're probably the hottest indie in America at the moment. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%, yeah. They're the only one you hear talk about. Now, they're the only one really I try and keep close up with. I've even ordered the T-shirt, James, in this pandemic that's finally arrived after a month. I got stung by import tax on it, though. 13 quid. No. I tell you what, Royal Mail are a bunch of jokers, really. But wouldn't have happened to Ian Rotten's day. He would have posted me like it was a pair of socks worth about 50p. Would have sneaked right through customs. But that's how much I'm into my GCW. I'm willing to pay the £13 import charge. And yeah, they're the one. You hear some talk about PCW Ultra, the other PCW, but other than that, really, AAW as well. But other than that, people just don't hear the talk. And yeah, there wasn't really anything that would even following Cage Match and other sources that was in danger of cracking my 10. I did want to mention as well, just very quickly, just thought that we haven't talked AEW at all. I think on the February show you're gonna be talking AEW a fair bit more. But I went back. My idea before this podcast, I decided to watch every match that I'd rated 4 stars or above again, and decided to also fill in some of my gaps on stuff that was high rated elsewhere. And honestly, I'd forgotten that I'd given it 4 stars, but I'd given Darby Allin and Pac 4 stars from 8. It was the Bash of the Beach show in January. That and the Darby Allin Cody match. And I tell you what, when it comes to rewatching matches, like my opinion on the two couldn't be more different. Rewatching them, I think Cody Rhodes has really got that quality where I think last year I was convinced I was putting the match with him and Dustin Rhodes on my top 10 for the year, and then I rewatched it and it wasn't near it. I think Cody is, and he probably admits this himself, he is so smoke, to borrow a line from I think one of his entrance songs, he is very smoke and mirrors. Like you rewatch it and sometimes that illusion kind of falls apart. I tell you what, like the difference between Cody and Darby Allin, which went about 20 minutes and was just too long. There's a botch on that. Like, I don't know if you remember the apron coffin drop spot where I think Darby was supposed to get his knees up but didn't, or at least JR thought he was supposed to, and then he does get his knees up for the finish, and maybe JR had just got the two spots mixed up and kind of killed it himself. It was just too long. And then I compared that, I watched it back to back with the Darby Allin Pac match from a couple of weeks later, and it was only 11 minutes. It was tighter, more impactful. They were going on TV time limits, and maybe that helped as well, but it just had just more natural momentum shifts. Darby was maybe underneath a little bit more. Maybe Cody gave him a bit too much maybe for his part, so it was more of a straightforward Pac win. But yeah, that was one that kind of held up in the 4-star range, whereas the Cody Darby Allin match, I was wanting to knock a whole star off it. Tell you what, the difference sometimes a rewatch can be.
Yeah, if I remember rightly, AEW had a funny old January, didn't they? They kind of came back from a Christmas break and things kind of went off the rails a little bit, didn't they? Because I'm just looking through my January spreadsheet, and the only match from AEW that I had over 4 stars was actually on the 21st of January, tag match between SCU and Adam Page and Kenny Omega. Remember that being really good, and I remember that whole series between them being really good. Apart from that, I think I gave both those matches you mentioned 3.75. I didn't get around to rewatching them, but I just remember suddenly then in February, like you said, AEW kind of got things right, and in what wasn't January, that kind of no man's land they were between pay-per-views. There wasn't a lot going on, and then finally when we got into February, we got into the run into the pay-per-view, and suddenly everything clicked for them. Wasn't that right?
Yeah, that's it. I think the Christmas break as well kind of helped them as well. I think January was the seeds of it. February is where they really hit the stride, though.
Yeah. And I just going to list a few other ones for people, a few under the radar ones again. From the 3rd of January in All Japan, it was for the junior heavyweight title, Susumu Yokosuka against Hikaru Sato. Just again, a really good limb work match. Again, a Jamesie match. From Grappl, Southern Underground Pro, in the Southern Territory in the US on the 5th of January, another Daniel Makabe match against Kevin Koo. I give that 4.25. But again, it's your typical Makabe match. Really good selling, really intense striking. Probably the best Kevin Koo match I've ever seen. And it's particularly good for the commentary by Dylan Hale, just to give him a shout out. Some really good stuff. And a match that I have seen nobody give any praise for whatsoever, and it's probably a sign of what you were saying earlier, Benno, about ROH and people just not watching it anymore. They had a match on their TV on the 11th of January between Jonathan Gresham and Josh Woods that I thought was phenomenal. Just some really good innovative stuff from Jonathan Gresham in it. It's only got an average of 3.47 on Grappl. Again, I went 4.25. And the last one that I'd recommend, again, not getting an awful lot of praise out there, from the 19th of January in All Japan. It's Naoya Nomura against Ayato Yoshida, where they actually wrestled to a 30-minute draw. And that's actually quite highly rated on Grappl. It's got a 4.04 average on Grappl. I gave it, again, 4.25. So again, I would like this podcast to be somewhere where people can listen and then say, God, I didn't know about that match. I hadn't heard about that match. And maybe go off and discover some new wrestlers and that kind of thing. And I'd like people to take something like that from the podcast as well. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about on your honourable mentions, or will we move on?
I was going to say, James, the distinct lacks of the biggest wrestling company in the world in our list there. Did you notice? Not much WWE, is there? I was going to say, if you forced me to make a case, I suppose you can count, my honourable mentions, my Devil and Bait match. But if you want to talk like main roster WWE, and you put a gun to my head, you could probably force me to include the Royal Rumble, but it would be purely based on the first half and not the second half. Like everything up to and including when Brock got eliminated was one of the greatest experiences I've had watching a Rumble. Maybe it's the fact that I don't care about the WWE product and it didn't bother me at all. Brock just launching a load of jobbers out the ring, or guys that maybe actually shouldn't be jobbers in a proper wrestling company, but unfortunately are in the WWE presentation of them. Obviously, the second half, and listeners to Spotlight will have known Joe's rant about the the Matt Riddle moment and Drew Galloway, Drew McIntyre in general. But if I was going to make an argument, that's the strongest I could make. And again, it's based on half a match. Like, how shocking is that, really? I mean, I wonder if that's going to be the story of your podcast this year, Jamesie.
Yeah, and it's actually something I'm going to make a point of checking every month, because, like, you list the amount of talented wrestlers that are in that company. You know what I mean? Between NXT UK, between main roster, they should be banging out 4-star plus matches on a weekly basis. There should be no excuse for it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's almost impossible to kind of talk too much about how little they produce for the talent they have. Like, and looking down through my spreadsheet, all I have is the Rumble match, like you said, at 4 stars. I gave Daniel Bryan against The Fiend 4 stars, just purely because I think he performed an absolute miracle in getting what he did out of that absolute shit show of a gimmick. You know what I mean? An impossible gimmick to work with, and he somehow got a decent logical match out of it. There was a good match on NXT UK that we talked about on the BWE way back on the 2nd of January. Do you remember the Dragunov Alexander Wolf match? They had a kind of a no-holds-barred match. But that's it. For a company with 300 wrestlers who have literally cleared the indies out of the top 5 tiers of wrestlers, not to mind taking the best wrestlers, and they're producing nothing. You know what I mean? And it's just desperate stuff. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to make that a little bit every month to look at what they produce versus what they have at their disposal, because it really is shameful, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And when they're getting shown up by, when you look at the Grappl highest matches by like UK takeovers and Worlds Collide shows, like, that just shows you, doesn't it? Like, and where we are on record as not being fans of the UK stuff in general. Yeah, WWE main roster just doesn't come into the conversation. I just put the rating filter into Grappl, just trying to see if I had anything that I could counter with, and like the women's Rumble comes up as a gentleman's 3. You know what I mean? That's as close as you're getting with me. And
slim pickings.
Imagine any other sport where, like, say in football, imagine the Premier League was this bad for this long. Like, there'd be riots in the streets, mate. It's just it's kind of crazy, but yeah, you never know. Maybe we'll get an upturn, James. Maybe in those barren April months, or maybe when you get to this month, May, and no one else is running, maybe they'll get in by default. But it's certainly not looking good.
Yeah, like what I might get Garrett to do is see if he can kind of let us know what the actual highest rated match in the month for WWE is like, because like the top 10 for this month is striking. There's basically 8 matches from Japan, 1 from the UK and 1 from Australia. There's not even anything from the US whatsoever. You know what I mean? So it's not just us, and it's not just our biases against WWE coming through. There's a consensus out there that their product is very, very poor at the moment. And like the very least they could be doing is just letting those great wrestlers they have wrestle, and they can't even do that. You know what I mean? It's just amazing, really. And as I said, I think it's something we'll try and keep track of as a bit of a bit every month, just to see what the highest rated match is from that company, because I think it'll tell its own story.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Benno, we have done the month of January for 2020, and I thought it would be nice to kind of round out each show with a classic match of the month. And I'm going to let my guest pick it every month. So do you want to let the listeners know what classic match? And I wanted you to pick a match that kind of had a consensus as a 5-star match, or one that was universally loved, and we'd kind of look back on it with 2020 eyes and see if it holds up. So what's the match that you chose?
Well, James, it's me and you in it, so it was always going to be Ring of Honor. Distinct lack of mid-2000s Ring of Honor discussion on this podcast. Tell you what, James, we'll have to make up for it now. I was looking, I was thinking, well, we did Nigel Bryan the other week. Can't do that. What are the other like consensus 5 stars ones? And sorry to brag again, but I was there for this one. I'll save Joe Kobashi for another day. That's another one there. I'm not even humble bragging at this point, James. You're just outright bragging. But WrestleMania weekend 2006, the one WrestleMania weekend I've ever done, the Dragon Gate 6 man. And I can just say the Dragon Gate 6 man, and people will know what I'm talking about. But it's Do-Fixer, Dragon Kid, Genki Horiguchi, and Raya Sato against the Blood Generation team of Sima, Yoshino, and Naruki Doi. This is one that was an immediate Meltzer 5 stars. It's funny looking back on it now because I remember in the building, Jamesie, I was, obviously being a big Ring of Honor fan. I kind of feel like in that period maybe you wouldn't get away with it now, but I reckon there were more people than not in that building who were kind of just pretending they knew about Dragon Gate. Who were kind of just, oh yeah, I watched Dragon Gate. Oh yeah, that's the company the Chiba works for. Oh yeah, I know that. I really feel like there's a lot of that. And you know what this match was? Rewatching it back, and I've actually rewatched it twice in the last few weeks. Just a few weeks ago, watched it as a watch along, and then rewatched it again for this podcast. And it's one of those matches where it's a crowd full of people pretending they watch Dragon Gate, actually seeing Dragon Gate for the first time and losing their minds. And I'm among them. I'm there in the third row. You can see me losing my mind a couple of points in this match. It's one of the biggest crowds Ring of Honor, did during this period, if not outright the biggest at this point. And it was the touring match done great. I know Gabe tried to keep the 6-man tradition going, maybe a bit longer than he should have, but it did, start a bit of tradition.
Yeah.
And it was just utterly incredible match. And you know what? A lot of fun watching it back again. I don't think I agree with 5 stars. I think I'll probably go 4.5 myself. But watching it back, it was just every bit as fun watching it a second time, watching the crowd lose their minds, watching the wrestlers loving the fact that this crowd is so into them, which, I think Kenta Kobashi didn't even expect the crowd to be behind him in the Samoa Joe match, so God knows what these lads thought coming out into Chicago Ridge. But yeah, absolutely loved it, and it was still a lot of, it's the type of match, with it being at the time, it was kind of the next level kind of spot flying kind of match, intricate Dragon Gate match that you might say in 2020 might not hold up because maybe things have moved on, but I think it just as well holds up, and I liked it as much now as it did then. Did you have fun watching it a second time? Because we talked about the Jamesie match. Doesn't strike me as a Jamesie match, but I'd hope it's one of those where what they do in the matches within the construct of that style is so good that it maybe is hard to ignore.
Oh yeah, and I can't say how much I loved this match back in 2006. I remember all the buzz, seeing you guys on the message board who were there at it talking about this match and how great it was, and getting the DVD. And the way hype sometimes ruins a match for you, and it's that happens to me so often. I get all the hype about a match, and then I watch it, and I'm so hyped up to watch it, I'm disappointed. This is one of those ones where, like you, Benno, I had no real prior experience of Dragon Gate. I knew who Sema was, and I knew who Dragon Kid was, probably from their brief appearances WCW more than anything. I knew about the style, and there were people on the message board in the weeks before this match kind of educating people about it and telling you who this guy is and what they do and all that kind of thing. But to me, this match in 2006, Gabe in The Observer, he was feeding Dave Meltzer all his lines in The Observer, and Dave calls it wrestling from the future. But that's what it felt like to me. I had never seen anything like this before, And with 2020 eyes, I still love this match. And in a way, I think this match has been very formative in me becoming the type of fan that I am. Because every time I see a match like this now, I compare it to that match, and nothing almost stands up to it, because this is so perfect and so flawless, and everything is done at such a speed that when I see an AEW tag match now, or a 6-man tag from somewhere else where people are going crazy about the high spots, I think, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as the Dragon Gate 6-man. It's just become the gold standard in my head for fireworks wrestling, and I don't want to insult it by calling it spot fest wrestling, because I do feel like there's an underlying psychology to it. I do feel like they protect their finishers in the match. When they're striking each other, they're beating the shit out of each other. There's a great moment. I think that there's a turning point in the match where the two team captains end up in the ring together. I think it's Sema and is it Ryo Saito, and they square. It's about 15 minutes in, and the two of them square off. And I think that's the point the crowd starts to realize, holy shit, like this match is on another level because those two beat the shit out of each other. You can see a lot of this match is just on the hard cam on the ROH DVD. You can see the crowd stand up at that point. And I don't think anybody sits down until 10 or 15 minutes later when it's over. Like, it's just, and like, we're talking a lot at the moment about the importance of crowds to pro wrestling. And we're talking about how bad pro wrestling is without crowds. And like, again, I think that the little bit extra push that this match gets is the crowd. Because, Dragon Gate experts will say that there have been better matches of this type in Japan in Dragon Gate. Better 6-man, better 8-man tags. But I don't think there will ever have been a Dragon Gate match with a crowd that was, and like, sure, you were there yourself, like you can say more than anybody, where the crowd were lifted by the wrestling. And then the wrestlers in turn, I think, were lifted by the crowd. Yeah. And I think it pushed them. And I think they probably had a finish in mind. But then the crowd was so good and so hot that it was almost like they just said, oh, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going, keep kicking out. And it's just an incredible, it's like a symbiotic relationship between crowd and wrestlers. Yeah. And it's just perfect. And I give it 5 stars for that reason, because to me, it's the gold standard of high-paced. I don't want to use the word spotty, but it's almost inevitable you have to use it. But that fast-paced style of wrestling, I don't think I have ever seen anything as good as this in terms of that. And it's the crowd that gives it that extra half star for me and brings it up to 5.
I think it's funny because, like, you mentioned there about like them. I do think there is that middle point in the match where things kind of flip, and you go from a crowd that's like politely enjoying it, but enthusiastically enjoying it, to absolutely losing their minds. And yeah, I think you're right, the wrestlers go along with it, because I don't know if you noticed rewatching it back, but Todd Sinclair has an absolute nightmare. Like, he has no idea what the finish is. Like, he must count 3 about 6 times. Like, he's got no idea. He's just but to be honest, it kind of adds to the drama. I can distinctly remember being there, all of us standing, so you can't really see the count anyway. And I'm buying into those near falls even more, and it works on tape as well. It's funny because live in the building, honestly, Jamesie, me being I was a Ring of Honor snob at that point, and believe it or not, things like that could exist. And I think I actually thought in the building that the AJ Styles Matt Sydal Generation Tag before it was better.
Wow.
Watched them both back the other week, and I was like, yep, I was kidding myself. There's maybe not a full star's difference, but it's coming close, because for me this is 4.5 pushing 4.75. This is worlds ahead of everything else at that time. Maybe with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that more. But yeah, it did. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the lads called an audible and just went that little bit more, because they could feel the crowd, and they could feel the crowd wanted more and more of this stuff. And yeah, Paul rolled. Todd Sinclair, I think, was the victim of that one. He had no idea.
And like, another thing that a match has to have to be great, I think, is influence as well. And like, you're only in a position to see the influence of a match 10, 15 years later. So we're able to look back at that match now, and like, that's a hugely influential match. Like, so many American wrestlers, because of these shows, ended up getting booked in Dragon Gate. Like, I always think of Matt Sydal, left America as a good high-flying US indie wrestler. And you remember he came back from Dragon Gate not that long afterwards, and he was a different man. He had just gotten so smooth and so good. Jack Evans is another one. And like, it would go on for the likes of Ricochet. Like, Ricochet got so good when he went to Dragon Gate. Would those guys have gotten those excursions if this trip to America didn't happen in 2006? It started the Gabe tradition of the big 6-mans on Mania weekend. Now, they never lived up to it again, but it became a thing that his WrestleMania weekend shows would be built around. Would Dragon Gate USA have happened if those guys hadn't done that excursion in the first place and gotten over to that extent? Would the UK tours have happened, where we ended up getting to see these guys in person a couple of years later in the UK? Do we even get the Strong Hearts? So you think of the kind of the timeline from there, where the Young Bucks then go over to Dragon Gate and become friendly with SEMA. Do we get the Strong Hearts in AEW? So there's a whole kind of a cascade of events that happened in US wrestling after this, that all you can trace back to this match. You know what I mean? And I just think it's a magical lightning in a bottle match. Like, the amount of times that I made non-wrestling fans watch that DVD back in the day when I was a student. And they would genuinely be blown away by it, because they would have a certain idea of what pro wrestling was in their heads. And even if they started off kind of scoffing at it, by the time it got to the end, and by the time it gets to that crazy finisher the Dragon Kid does, they're literally sitting there with their jaws on the ground saying, my God, like, what is this wrestling? It's just like something from another planet, So it's a very special match to me. I'm delighted you picked it, Benno. Like, I knew, well, you'd go for ROH. I knew when I was giving you the chance you wouldn't let me down. I thought it might be Joe Kobashi because you were there, but as you said, maybe that's a show in itself, and we might have to review that whole show as a whole on Grappl at some point. But yeah, I just loved getting to watch this match again. It's a special match to me. It's one that kind of, as I said, stands out in my memory, and really, really nice to relive it again.
Oh, I tell you what, I'm taking that as a promise, James. We're definitely doing that, Joe Kobashi, soon enough. It's definitely happening. But yeah, I've got to be honest. I went in this conversation from starting at 4.5 to moving to 4.75 to like, you might have convinced me a 5 now. That's the legacy of this match. Yeah, it is. I don't begrudge anyone throwing 5 at it. Looking at it now. If you gave the first half of that match happened on a Dynamite, and you know what, it should be happening on a Dynamite because they've got access to
exactly.
They got the access there. Like, what is going on? The first half of this though would be like people be talking about it as the best Dynamite match, and the Dynamite run. Like, never mind when it hits the second half, and that's us talking 14 years later. So yeah, it says a lot for the legacy of that match too, doesn't it? But yeah, of course, always had to be ROH, James. It always is with me and you. Always goes back to the old days. Yeah, but yeah, this was a special weekend for me, Jamesy. I was gutted that day because that morning was Necro Loki, and I was still a bit jet lagged, and I slept in, and I missed that.
Benno, no.
My mate who I was staying with, and Justin listens to a lot of these podcasts, and I've never forgiven him. Yeah, I think he just thought I looked peaceful, and he let me sleep in, and then we got up a bit too late. It'll be its own podcast at some point. I talked about it on the live Germany one, but we ended up getting a bit lost in the hood in Chicago and never quite made our way to that. It was in a sketchy part of town that I had to be a bit south show, so I was gutted to miss that. But yeah, once we got ran up to the Supercar of Honor and got to Chicago Ridge, it was all forgotten by the end of this night. So it was all worth it in the end, even if still feel a bit gutted. Maybe Necro Luki, that's one we can go back and review at some point. I don't think it's a 5-star match, but it's a very good one.
That whole weekend, like, sure, wasn't that the weekend that the big BJ Whitmer and Jimmy Jacobs power bomb spot happened where he nearly killed him off the ring apron?
That's the one.
There was Danielson and Roderick Strong have to follow this match?
That was the main event afterwards.
Yeah,
that was
Jesus.
I hadn't realised until I rewatched this a few weeks ago. That almost goes an hour. Like the cheek of like going an hour.
There was no time shows back then, so there wasn't.
That's it. We were all very tired by the end of it, but worth it. Yeah, it was as a weekend goes, like you say. Yeah, you got your Jimmy Jacobs, BJ Whitmer, and you got Bryan Danielson and Lance Storm, which is a real memorable match in there as well. The payoff to the Colt Cabana homicide feud.
Yes.
The good old days, James.
Oh God, Jesus, Benno. If we get started, we'll end up talking for another hour. So maybe we'll just put a line under it and save it for an ROH retro review. What do you think?
For sure, yeah. But yeah, I'm taking that as a date. Coming soon to Grappl.
Definitely, with my pleasure. Yeah. Well, listen, Benno, this has been an absolute pleasure. As I said at the start, I couldn't think of a better man to have on. Number one, because of your wrestling knowledge. Number two, because it's nice to have a reassuring voice that I'm used to talking to on these podcasts as my co-host on BWE and that kind of thing. So thanks so much. Like, I know, and like, you put a lot of work into rewatching matches for this, and you typed up a lovely spreadsheet for us and everything like that. Very, very grateful for having you on here. I suppose you're definitely the most hardworking man in podcasting at the moment. Like, it feels like you're doing 2 or 3 a week at this point, so you probably have plenty of things to plug, I'm sure, at the moment.
Oh yeah, people must be sick of the sound of my voice right now. It's one of them, James. What else have we got to do right now? We're all locked in. I might launch another couple of podcasts this weekend. What do you reckon? But yeah, it's honestly a huge honour coming on your first show. I'm excited to see the guests going forward. But yeah, massively honoured to be on the first one, and I had a hell of a time doing it. But yeah, on this network, if anyone doesn't normally listen, we have our Spotlight show. We'll be recording on Monday, I believe, this week for this one. We're going to wait for Money in the Bank to get in the can, just so Joe can have a rightful go at that. So that should be a lot of fun. Was doing a lot of flashback 90s stuff, so we're going to be looking at a bit further look at 1987 with a look at the Canadian Stampede in your house show, which was actually the week before Bash of the Beach 97 that we reviewed a few weeks ago with Martin. So yeah, Martin's going to be back for joining us with that, and then obviously next week, James, we've got a big show coming up on British Wrestling Experience over on Post that people can look forward to. So yeah, all the podcasts, follow me at Benson Richard E on Twitter, and yeah, I promise I'll calm down in a bit, but again, it's a lockdown. Podcasts are keeping us all going, and hopefully it's good entertainment for everybody.
As I said, thanks a million again, Benno, for coming on. This has been the January 2020 match of the month on the Grappl. We're a Grappl audio network now, I suppose, Benno, are we? Are we allowed to call it that now that we have more than one show?
Moved up in the world, mate. I've changed the logos on the podcast feed. I've renamed it as well. So yeah, there you go. It's official now.
Excellent. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jamesie_2015. And as Benno said, you can catch me on the British Wrestling Experience every 2 weeks over on Post with Benno and Martin. Signing out. Thanks a million for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our first show.